Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is bullied by Rias part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Everyone knew that God and Satan didn't get along. It was like a fundamental truth of the world that every child learned before they lost their first molar. Bad and good didn't mix because that's how the world was supposed to be. There were things that decent people just didn't do, and everyone knew those basic rules kept the world spinning. Except one particular person, though it could be argued that instead of ignorance, he really just couldn't bring himself to care. He had more important things to worry about, like that hole in his shoe that made walking mildly uncomfortable. As Issei Hayato made his way down a street with a smile as bright as the setting sun, hand in hand with his new girlfriend, his cheeks began to flush with a nervous energy when the sweet, innocent girl he was beginning to fall in love with led him into a deserted park with a rather naughty and inviting smile that sent his little brother into overdrive. He never even knew that she could smile like that, and the gap between her naughty side and her usually more reserved side was more than a little arousing. As the two of them sat side by side on the edge of a little fountain with a certain comfortable silence, their lips drew closer and closer with every passing second, never losing sight of each other's gaze, as if their eyes could peer deep into each other's soul. When Yuma whispered his ear seductively, "Will you do something for me, Issei-kun?" What is it?" Of course, that was the point at which he discovered something else he didn't know about innocent little Yuma Amano. "Will you die for me?" Like how she could turn her hand into a clawed paw before she tried to spear him with it. At the beginning of the date, he had already decided that the memories of this day with Yuma-chan would forever occupy a special spot inside him. As his clawed destiny sped towards his chest, a detached part of his mind found it morbidly ironic that his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend agreed with him, literally. As in, her clawed arm digging out his chest cavity. At least that was before someone kicked him out of the way and into the fountain. His kicker, a tall boy with shaggy yellow hair and strange scars running along his cheeks, stood there with a frown on his face. Now, as we were saying, there was someone who really didn't care about things like that. Issei Hayato is not that person. In fact, he was quite put out with the attempted murder. "I would thank you to take your lover's quarrel somewhere else," the blonde boy noted with a flat tone as he somehow ignored her large black raven wings. "I don't care if he cheated on you until you have to kill him, but I happen to live over there." He jerked his chin in the direction of the wooded area in that park. "And I don't appreciate having to clean up a murder scene just so that I don't get questioned by the police. It's kinda troublesome." Ordinarily, Issei would be rather annoyed if someone kicked him into a pool of water just before he got his first kiss, but at the moment he was a little too busy gaping at the strange-looking boy who was wearing his school's uniform and the fact that he had almost been killed by his ex-girlfriend. "Wait, you. I know you. You're that delinquent from my school." "Yes," the blonde drawled with a lazy look at the drenched boy in the pool. "I'm sure my uniform didn't have anything to do with that." The blonde dismissed him with another lazy glance before he turned back to the dark-haired girl who was glaring at him, her beautiful face currently twisted spiteful mask. "Now can you please kill him somewhere else?" The blonde made a shooing motion. "I believe there's a nice abandoned factory somewhere on the other side of town that would be much less conspicuous." "Hey! I saw you this morning too." The strange boy gave Issei a mildly amused look. "You're not very bright, are you? Isn't this the part where people usually run away from someone who just tried to manually remove your guts?" "No one," the girl who once looked like a gift from heaven said with a vicious hiss before she flicked her wrist, "is running away." The boy blinked at the spear of light that suddenly protruded from his chest, then at the sizzling piece of metal that he had pulled out almost on reflex to block the projectile. Judging by the sucking hole in his chest where his heart used to be, and the sizzling, deformed piece of metal that used to be a kunai. Naruto mentally made a note to not try blocking spears of light with flimsy pieces of metal again. "Ah crap, I was going to wear this until the week ended," he mumbled before falling over backwards. In front of him, Issei stared at another identical shaft of light that had just destroyed his heart. Red liquid started to seep out from his chest, tainting the clear fountain water with a pinkish red hue. "I'm sorry about this," she said. Her voice was fading away, nor did it even sound remotely sorry. "You were a threat to us, so we decided to get rid of you early. If you want to hold a grudge, then hate the god who put the sacred gear inside you." She turned to the blonde delinquent who was sprawled on a pool of spreading blood. "You, however, were just in the way. Serves you right for interfering in something. If you hadn't, you might have been able to live your pathetic life a little longer." Her words seemed to invigorate the dying blonde as his fingers scrabbled at the earth feebly. One of Yuma's delicate eyebrows rose curiously at how the blonde was not dead yet, since she was quite sure she had destroyed his heart. In fact, if she didn't know any better, she could swear that the hole in the middle of his chest seemed to be trying to knit itself back together, but the corrosive properties of her light was supposed prevented any sort of healing. "This stupid pebble is so uncomfortable," the blonde moaned lowly. "Couldn't you have killed me on grass? Or even in bed?" The blue eyes glanced at her again. "I would definitely prefer it in bed. A nice comfy bed with you on top." The thing that had called herself Yuma blinked, and her lips twitched with some amusement. It was not often a dead man tried to flirt with his killer. Even less often, however, was when someone started to move again after he just had his heart removed. Her eyes widened as the blonde pushed himself into a sitting position with a grunt. The blue of his eyes were clearly visible as he glared at her. What the hell? She prepared to attack again, only this spear was aimed at obliterating his head. However, the half-dead blonde was even quicker on the draw. Even before the spear could be formed, the blonde's other arm, which had been scrabbling around, suddenly lashed out, sending a sharp pebble into her palm. Her blood splashed on the ground as she cradled her wounded hand with an ugly snarl. Surging forwards again, she attempted another attack when her senses alerted her to several incoming presences. Cursing as a crest she recognized as one belonging to the local devil formed on the ground, she sent the bleeding Isse a fierce glare when another she heard the whistling of another pebble, stopping her attack before she could even contemplate making one. Ducking away from the stony-faced blonde's projectile, she cursed loudly again and unfurled her wings with a loud clap and leapt into the air. Keeping a wary eye on both the strange glowing crest on the ground and the loudly cursing woman until she was but a speck in the dusky horizon, the bleeding blonde finally pitched forward again and collapsed on the ground face first as the last of his strength left him. Rolling around on his back with a heavy grunt, the boy grimaced to himself as the crest solidified. His injuries were somewhat less than lethal, he'd been in far worse conditions, but the chances of him being able to fight off any new hostiles were looking bleak at the moment. He could heal, but it would take a whole lot more than a day. And it would certainly involve him being unconscious for most of the duration. Oya? What is this? He heard a faint feminine voice floating over to his dying ears. There seems we planned Rias. The voices seemed to pan in and out of his fading consciousness. What we do? The first person seemed to hesitate, and he tried to focus a little so he could hear a little better. It wouldn't do to get his body molested while he wasn't in a position to enjoy it after all. He helped Hayato-kun. He felt a small, almost tiny hand softly brush his yellow, blood-stained bangs back and caress his cheek with a gentleness he had not experienced in a long time. It would be the least I could do. A hand pressed onto his chest, and he felt something warm wash on him, but he has no gears. No special talents. The second person finally said after an undetermined moment, nothing, not even a smidge of potential. Hayato-kun needs a minimum of 8 pawns, and all you would have left is the bishop, the knight, or the rook. And even if you use a pawn on him, none of the remaining pieces will be sufficient for Hayato-kun's revival. The second voice pointed out reasonably, he might turn out useful later on, much later on, but in the meantime we'd be trading a valuable pawn for a worthless piece. He felt a little offended at that and tried to say something, but his throat still wouldn't cooperate, only barely managing a tiny insulted gurgle. He heard 2 feminine gasps of surprise. He's still alive. Somehow. The second person muttered. After a moment of silence that seemed to take an eternity, the first person finally sighed as if encouraging herself. How could I be a good king if I allow innocent passerbys to die on my territory? The second voice chuckled softly. I suppose not. You were always a softer like that. You might want to get ready for your father's disapproval, though. Rias grunted. It wouldn't be the first time. Indeed. That was about all he could take as a peaceful blackness blanketed his consciousness entirely. Blue eyes snapped open warily, and wildly swung around the plain white walls of a room while the smell of bleach and clean linen pervaded his nose. Grunting, the blonde slowly pulled himself upright from the comfortable bed before he looked downwards and gingerly poked his chest where a hole was meant to be. How interesting! Sighing in some relief, he let his hands fall when he felt something warm underneath his palm. The stranger froze before his eyes drifted towards his palm. Giving the mound of flesh another appreciative squeeze that prompted a moan from the sleeping girl, the blonde sighed again. Shifting his weight, he calmly got out of the infirmary's bed and shrugged on a shirt that had been laid out on the next bed. With almost impeccable calm, he glanced at his surprised bedmate. Her deep crimson hair fanned out on the bed, standing out magnificently against the white cloth before he carefully tucked the sleeping girl back into bed. We couldn't find out where you lived, you know. Someone suddenly spoke, prompting the blonde to whirl around and narrow his eyes at the girl leaning on the wall with a noble atmosphere around her. Her long glossy hair fell down her shoulders in a neat ribbon ponytail, and her arms were folded under her sizable bust. Uzumaki Naruto. Haim-chan. The blonde replied with a whimsical grin. She sighed tiredly. I really should be more surprised. The raven-haired girl grunted. The blonde's grin grew wider. I knew I recognized your voice last night, he said with a nod of acknowledgement. Speaking of which, what are you guys? He asked in a casual manner that caused one of her eyebrows to rise as he brushed his long shaggy hair back, deftly tying it into a rough ponytail with a piece of twine that he retrieved from the bedside. We are devils from the House of Gremory, one of 72 noble demonic families. She jerked her chin at the sleeping redhead. That's Rias Gremory, current head of house. Her eyebrow rose even higher as the blonde continued to button up his shirt with a completely unconcerned wave for her to continue. I didn't recognize you last night because of all the blood, she said coolly as she poured a cup of hot tea for herself, But then I didn't expect to find a classmate literally dying from kindness last night either. Much less the most annoying one alive. I love you too, Haim-chan. The blonde smirked as he gracefully slid into the seat opposite of her. Akino sighed. She had long since given up on trying to get him to call her something other than that. Tea? 1. No sugar. The blonde accepted the porcelain cup of steaming liquid before snorting. I wasn't being kind, by the way. So you didn't mean to save him? If I was saving something, it was saving myself the pain. Letting him die on my front lawn was just too much trouble. He gave her a curious look. The boy is alive, isn't he? You two didn't eat him or something, right? That's what devils do, right? We're devils, not cannibals. The raven-haired girl frowned. And don't speak as if you're not one of us now. When Rias brought you back, you became a devil under her authority. There is no going back to your human life. Naruto shrugged and sipped his tea before pausing to look at the steaming cup with appreciation. This is good. Thank you. Akino accepted the compliment with a graceful nod. Sure doesn't feel any different on this side of the fence though. I always figured the first thing I'd do if I became a devil was to go berserk and rampage on some poor innocent village. He commented with a strangely amused smile. Akino blinked and decided to ignore his strange joke. What did you mean by front lawn? We couldn't find any of your records other than a birth certificate, much less a place of residence. I would be surprised if you did. The blonde noted with a smirk. Looking around, he located his shoes and slipped them on. By the way, does she always sleep with strangers while she's naked? Her dark eyes shifted towards her sleeping friend. Not always. There were certain complications. Akino replied swiftly. Naruto tilted his head curiously, such as? The way the raven-haired beauty looked away before answering immediately roused his suspicion. After healing Issei-san, she refused to let me help her and forced herself to heal you as well before she dropped from sheer fatigue. Her gaze returned to the serene blonde. Don't change the topic, by the way. Where do you live? I changed the topic, the blonde countered bluntly with a deceptively serene smile as he observed the girl. She was telling the truth, or at least a part of it, because he could tell she definitely wasn't giving him the whole truth, because as far as you're concerned, I live on a street called None of Your Business. By the way, may I know how you made this tea? Akino was no stranger to death, and she had seen many different kinds of reactions when someone was told that they had been resurrected as devils. In fact, most newly made devils tended to refuse acknowledging something as traumatic as their own deaths, though there were a few who simply accepted it and moved on. Case in point, Issei had simply taken it as Rias had laid it out for him and started planning to get stronger with an admirable tenacity. Though she suspected that probably had more to do with Rias telling him that everything would be possible as a devil with power, including harems. However, something about the way the blonde before her accepted the situation with an efficient equanimity, as if it was a mere curio to be glanced at before he moved on with his life, really frustrated the statuesque beauty standing by the exit. Annoyed by his unwillingness to cooperate, Akino tried another way to get information from him. No, you may not. It was a little childish, she admitted to herself mentally, but she couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction at denying him something the same way he was denying her the information she wanted. Unless you can explain why you're taking all this so well? The blonde blinked. You mean what happened last night was supposed to be strange? I don't think people who can fly or bring the dead back to life can be considered normal, do you? Then you'd be pretty surprised. Naruto observed with another one of his crooked smiles. Incidentally, if I can have your tea recipe, can I keep this? He plucked his new shirt. This is pretty comfortable and I lost my last one. We already saved your life, what's one more shirt? The raven-haired girl said with a snide smile as she pulled out her last trump card. I didn't ask you to save it. Naruto remarked just as snidely, so shirt? Akino sighed, take it. We'll contact you again with more information. Don't you ever get tired of chasing me around? Don't remind me. Akino growled as she threw a dark look at the nonchalant blonde. Said blonde merely smirked even harder. Dark black eyes sent him a hard look. Placing her own cup of boiling tea down silently, she stalked towards the strangely unconcerned blonde and jabbed one finger into his chest. You are bound to us now whether you like it or not. Your life is tied to my master. You owe us, and devils always collect. Dispassionately, the blonde removed the finger from his chest and shrugged before leaving the room without another word, pausing only to complain quietly about the linoleum floor's coldness that seeped through the hole in his shoe. Placing 2 fingers on her temple to rub away the growing headache, Akino stared at the quietly breathing Rias. Well, that wasn't helpful at all. At least we got Issei-san back to his house without any further complication, though we only managed to give him a brief overview. The red-haired princess mumbled sleepily, then winced as she glanced at her watch. That said, I certainly didn't expect to get knocked out for a whole day. Akino simply nodded. The boy had come into the infirmary several times seeking for a more elaborate explanation regarding the entire situation throughout the day, but she had successfully managed to hold him off until Rias came around, seeing as she knew that her best friend would want the honor of telling him herself. I take it you heard everything, Ria? Pale white skin shifted under the blanket as she stretched gloriously. Almost everything. You are acquainted with him? Aquino grimaced, wishing she wasn't, and nodded. He's my classmate, a sponsored student under the Scholarship for Orphans. He has abysmal marks in everything except traditional Japanese, and he is constantly late. His blonde hair, blue eyes, and those scars on his cheeks doesn't help his image either, so almost everybody avoids him. The elegant girl decided not to mention the fact that those very same attributes also seemed to mark him as a susceptible target for bullying. The only problem with that, however, was the fact that every time he was targeted for bullying, the culprit invariably ended up severely injured in various humiliating and entertaining ways. The last one apparently ordered him to buy some cigarettes for him, or suffer a beating. The teachers found said bully the next morning, along with his gang, neatly stuffed down a row of toilet bowls head first. To add insult to injury, all of them were also butt naked and had cartons of cigarettes and other drugs stuffed up their rear ends. It went without saying that almost everyone looked at the blonde fearfully since then, but as there was simply no proof that he was involved in it outside of simple coincidence, since he always had a rock-solid alibi with at least 3 different witnesses swearing that they saw him at any given time the previous day. Almost everybody? The redhead asked with a questioning glint in her eyes. She hadn't even known that Aquino was acquainted with the blonde, and yet the way they had spoken to each other seemed to hint at something more than a passing familiarity. Aquino glared at her, and Rias wisely decided to find out some other way. If he's under Nissan's scholarship, how come I don't know about him? Rias questioned as she got out of bed without any shame whatsoever and paced the infirmary in her birthday suit. I would be surprised if you did. Her best friend commented dryly. If Issei-san is the epitome of averageness with the exception of his remarkable lust, then Uzumaki-san is an exemplary bottom feeder who only stands out because he fails so badly. Be nice, Aquino. Rias sighed. He's still one of us now, even if he doesn't seem to like it. I do not doubt this is simply his way of dealing with his death. We just have to ease him into the situation. The dark-haired girl smiled a bit wanly. I'm sorry, his lackadaisical attitude towards the school and indirectly, your generosity in helping him go to school just rubs me the wrong way. Plus you're irritated from having to stand watch the whole night to make sure he didn't molest me. Ria added with an amused smile. Aquino stopped herself mid-yawn and gave her best friend a dry look. It wouldn't have been a problem if you hadn't been too heavy to move alone. Someone's been sneaking away a little bit too much of those snacks at night, I see. The argument very quickly devolved into a childish fit of insult throwing after that. The blonde grunted as he ran one hand through his long shaggy hair. For some reason, his body felt extremely heavy and lethargic. One pained blue eye glanced out the window and noted that the sun was just about to go down, while another look at the worn watch strapped to his wrist told him that he had slept for almost 24 hours, instead of the 2 or 3 days he had been expecting. You! A finger stabbed the air in his direction as a boy suddenly shouted, sending a sinking suspicion down Naruto's back that the day wasn't over yet as a familiar-looking student hurried towards him. Oh gods above and below, spare me this headache. Naruto muttered under his breath, you already took my life, what more do you want? He silently pleaded to thin air. Sadly, his prayers went unanswered as he felt someone grabbing his arm. You were there last night, you remember her, right? The brown-haired boy uttered with an almost frantic light in his eyes. In the absence of the 2 girls who had apparently saved him last night, the boy had been driving himself spare at the situation he had found himself in with no answers save a few brief sentences outlining his new existence as a devil. The fact that no one seemed to remember his remarkably aggressive ex-girlfriend did not help his sanity one bit. No one knows her anymore, but you do, right? You mean Stabby Boob Flasher-chan? Yes. Nope. Doesn't ring a bell. Naruto cut off his triumphant celebration flatly as he pushed past the suddenly disappointed boy. Oh, Naruto had barely gone down the corridor a few yards before Issei suddenly perked up again. Hey, wait. How'd you know if she flashed her boobs if you never met her before? You would be surprised at how many people flash their boobs at me. Naruto commented dryly, or just how many people tried to stab me for that matter. The boy blinked. Really? They flash you just like that? No. I lied. Gah. Wait up, come on. Something seriously strange is going on. Naruto resolutely kept his eyes in front of him as he ignored the pest's continual questions with remarkable fortitude, even though their little, noisy rapport drew them a lot of attention from curious bystanders. He was so focused on ignoring Issei that he didn't even realize that his soreness slowly melted away as the sun faded. His little strategy was actually working pretty well, if you ignored the fact that Issei was currently attached to his leg in a bear hug, and continued working right up until they reached the same park from the night before. Of course, Naruto being Naruto, was already driven halfway mad by the unending stream of questions and begging coming from somewhere near his leg. The blonde was very seriously contemplating murder when someone did the job for him by putting a spear of light through the dark-haired boy's guts. Issei immediately let go of the blonde's leg, fell to his knees with an earth-shattering scream of pain. The blonde, however, whipped around, half expecting the crazy girl with wings to be there again, but instead of an insane girl in bondage gear, there was only an old-looking man with a perverted leer pasted to his thin lips. Well, what do we have here? Two low-ranking devils. Your master must be pretty very low-ranking if he was desperate enough chose this place as a territory. He was cut off by a screech from the blonde one with scars on his cheeks. GAH. Why do people keep dying on my fucking garden? Do you people not know how impolite that is? That's it, I'm moving. To some deep, fucking, peaceful forest somewhere. His rant was so surprising that the startled man had no idea how to react when Naruto brushed past him before diving into the foliage. There was some rustling before the blonde reappeared with a pack tent slung neatly rolled up and stacked on top of a worn, an old hiking bag that contained all his belongings. Several dented pots and pans were strung up around the dirty green bag, making a loud clanking sound as the blonde tried to hustle past the old man without a word. Hold it, Stray. You're not going anywhere. Naruto groaned as a spear made of almost solid light buried itself by his legs, barring his path forward. He was about to start cursing the old man when two more newcomers made their appearance. I found the two of you, so I get to kill you. Look, Naruto began emphatically, his patience was seriously beginning to wear thin. I appreciate the fact that you managed to get Blabbermouth over there to stop talking, even if his screaming isn't much of an improvement, but do you mind getting the fuck away from me? The taller man's nostrils flared in anger as he reared back with another spear. You impudent little shit. He let the spear fly at the blonde. Fuck this. His eyes bugged as the blonde, who had been about 10 feet away and on the verge of being impaled, suddenly appeared directly in front of him. What dash? The fallen angel didn't manage to finish whatever he was about to say before the blonde promptly introduced the edge of a saucepan to his nose. Good evening, fallen angel-san, Rias began. She melted out of the shadows, Akino slightly behind her before stopping abruptly at the scene before her. Akino. She was inordinately proud that her voice had not hitched at all. Yes, Rias? Please tell me I'm not hallucinating. Her friend, who was hovering near Issei, healing him with some sort of magic glow, looked up and let an uncertain grin grace her smooth features. You're not. Or at least I don't think so. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone breaking in a fallen angel's face with saucepans before. Rias couldn't help but grin as well as the fallen angel squeaked and began to run from the rampaging blonde. Judging by how hard the blonde was hitting him with those saucepans, it was going to take a minor miracle for the former angel to straighten out his nose again. That's because there hasn't been anyone stupid enough to try it, Akino noted dryly, except that idiot over there apparently. What I want to know, however, is how the hell is he doing that? Rias remarked with an inquisitive expression at the fallen angel's bruised visage. That's a genuine fallen angel, and not a weak one either. Not even Kiba can wound someone like that with nothing but his bare hands and strength. I'm more interested in how his saucepan isn't in pieces yet with how hard he is swinging them, Akino commented, somewhat amused at the strange situation. That's enough. I'll kill you, you fucking brat. The black-winged man roared as he suddenly flapped his wings and soared above them. Rias figured his declaration might have been somewhat more effective and intimidating if it wasn't for the fact that his face was currently nothing more than a black and blue lump courtesy of one annoyed blonde. If nothing else, the blonde was certainly vindictive. She didn't think Naruto had aimed anywhere but his face, specifically his nose, the entire time. I'll tear you apart limb from. And then a saucepan came whizzing out of nowhere with unnerving speed, promptly knocking him out of the air when it smacked him in the crotch with enough force to make Issei's eyes water. Fallen angel-san, Rias sketched a light bow as she desperately tried to keep the grin off her face at the crying angel clutching his family jewels. I certainly have no grudge against you personally, but if you try to harm my cute little servants any further, I'm afraid that I may have to interfere. The watery-eyed fallen angel opened his mouth to retort but paled and flinched away as Naruto threateningly waved a saucepan in his general direction. He knew firsthand exactly how accurately the boy could throw those lumps of metal if the pain his fishing tackle was generating was any indication. I don't care what you two do to each other, beat each other into bleeding lumps of flesh for all I care, but do you mind if I break him first? Sure, Rias hushed him, you're still an untrained soldier, you might be able to defeat him with some training but right now you are not strong enough. No, I'm fairly sure I can deal with a pervert. Unfortunately you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. This man is not just any pervert nor is he one you can deal with. Rias cut him off resolutely. The blonde first gave the bruised and crying fallen angel a deadpan look, then at his remaining frying pan, before directing his gaze at her. You seriously think so? In response she patted his cheek affectionately. It's alright, Naruto-san, I'll protect you. Are those balls in your head working or are they just there for decoration? Ignoring his blunt retort as if he hadn't spoken at all, her crimson hair flowed in the calm evening breeze as she smiled at him reassuringly the way a big sister would to her baby brother. Just trust me. He almost threw a tantrum right there and then. Never had he met someone so stubborn and make it so insulting at the same time. Ever look in the mirror? He heard a deep, gruff sound answer him from deep inside his psyche before chuckling. The Uzumaki drew a deep calming breath before he shoved his remaining saucepan back into his pack. Fine. Whatever. Do as you like. He threw his hands up in the air and sat down on his backpack and crossed his legs with an exasperated look plastered on his face. Looks like your little lover's spat is finally over. The fallen angel puffed up his chest as if he had not just spent the last 15 minutes getting his face bashed in by the blonde and his trusty saucepans. He immediately deflated again when aforementioned blonde sent him a glare. So these two belong to you. Does that mean this town is under your protection? At her stiff nod, the man continued, very well then. For today, I will apologize. But I advise you not to let your servant loose. People like me might be having a walk and bump into them. Thanks for the advice. This town is under my surveillance. So if you get in my way, then I won't hold back. I will say the same to you, heiress of the House of Gremory. My name is Donesik. The man in the grey frock announced proudly, or as proud as he could with that lisp. I hope we won't meet again. Your nose certainly hopes so, Naruto muttered. The man spreads his black wings, and his body started to float. Sending one last glare at the blonde, the man hurriedly disappeared into the dark night sky. In hindsight, Naruto supposed that he should not have been surprised. The day had begun innocently enough. There was a certain normalcy about the whole routine that he found reassuring. To wake up at the same time, wear the same uniform, take the same path to school, to sit in the same lectures and dismiss the same harmless posturing classroom politics that was almost endemically prevalent in any structured setting was rather amusing and predictable. Predictable he could deal with easily. Dealing with immortal nut jobs that had obscenely more power than was appropriate, and wanted his life ever since he had born. Somewhat less so. It tended to be a rather irritating affair on the whole after all. So while his nice, normal, boring routine had been interrupted by a minor hiccup such as the discovery of a more arcane side of this world, he deeply appreciated just being a normal person in the crowd once in a while. No one was throwing stones at him, or making him eat rotten food, or buying orange suits because it was all that he could afford. No single-minded years of training just so that he had a chance to survive to the exclusion of all else. Yes, he could certainly deal with life as it was, even if there were moments of absolute boredom. Such as the long-winded lecture currently unfolding at the front of the class. On the bright side, he felt an amusing amount of killing intent directed his way from the general area where he knew Akino Himejima sat. Life continued to be good right up until he suddenly found himself thrust into the limelight by a certain stubborn magical princess who had shown up from up the class next door and insisted that he follow her somewhere. He had ditched her immediately, of course. Naturally, that didn't seem to stop the killing intent he had been feeling ever since class from suddenly tripling as the news of his being seen in the company of one Rias Gremory, as the culprits were mentally cursing a useless delinquent like him for daring to even breathe the same air as Rias Gremory. How dare he indeed, the blonde mentally mused to himself as he dismissed the glares with casual nonchalance, and headed up for the roof. Then again, if someone could look an immortal being of power and malice and kick its snout a couple of times for good measure, he supposed that person would develop a certain amount of immunity to killing intent as well. He had that thought would be the end of that. So when the door to the roof burst open not even 20 minutes after he had sat down with a bun and a book, Naruto sighed to himself. Of course, as Fate's personal chew toy, he should have known better. Kiba tiredly ran a hand through his platinum blonde locks and smiled wearily at the strange boy sitting directly in the middle of the school roof. His legs were folded languidly as he read a book in one hand through a simple pair of glasses perched on his nose and a simple melon bun in the other. Uzumaki-san. He greeted the boy peering at him over his glasses. Hiding the mild frustration at not being able to have his lunch in peace, Naruto carefully shut the book with a tiny sigh and surveyed the two people who had found him. While the boy with the aristocratic good looks was someone he did not know, the glowering dark-haired teenager beside him was someone he certainly did. Though for some reason, said glower was not directed at him, but at the aristocratic boy, who ignored the glare with equally impressive ease. Can I help you? He finally queried with a neutral expression. Uzumaki-san, would you mind coming with me for a moment? The polite way in which the question was delivered did nothing to hide the fact that it was an order. How did you even find me? Naruto questioned curiously as he acquiesced with another regretful look at his unfinished lunch. I was pretty sure no one would find me here. The youth named Kiba gave him a strained smile, the only sign that he still had difficulty believing what he had seen. I didn't actually. In fact, I do believe the door to the roof has been locked even before I enrolled. He pointedly glanced at the fence roof that was completely empty save for a ragged carpet on the ground and the old but serviceable desk situated right in the middle of the roof, clues that the strange, quiet boy apparently came up here quite often. Though he had to wonder what the Uzumaki did about the searing sunlight. It was. Naruto replied blandly without an explanation as to what he was doing up here, and you didn't answer my question. How should I put this? Kiba said thoughtfully, none of us could find you, not even when Rias-senpai used her magic to scry for you. So she tried again. And again. And again. He paused and grinned appreciatively at the older blonde. In fact, When I left, I do believe she was on the verge of tearing her hair out and trying again. That was when Akino-senpai finally gave up and told me to look for you up here. Ah. That explains it then. Kiba's eyebrow quirked curiously at that. She knows you come up here often? Naruto shrugged. She is very persistent in her duties as class representative. I can believe that. Kiba agreed with an acknowledging smile at the blonde who was still languishing on the chair with an almost casual elegance. Now, if you will? The taller blonde shrugged and stood up with one last mournful look at his bun while he patted the crumbs off his clothes and placed the book on the desk. If they were willing to go that far to find him, he might as well humor them. This time, he was even more amused by the surprising amount of killing intent generated by the female portion of the student population who witnessed the two of them following Kiba. Although if the way Issei was sweating buckets as they headed for this club room was any indication, the brown-haired boy was just about ready to bolt for the nearest hole. Watching him piss his pants would be interesting. Unfortunately for the blonde, his new comrade managed to hold it in until the three of them reached the relative safety of a large, mansion-like structure in the old section of the school. This is where our club room is located. I hope that you'll enjoy your time with us, their guardian commented with a polite yet curious smile as he began climbing the ostentatious staircase that took them up to the second floor. His soft, pale yellow curls shifting across turquoise orbs as he kept an eye on the two newcomers, the much taller blonde and the thinner, smaller brown-haired boy who was fidgeting beside him. Naruto quirked one eyebrow as he heard the brown-haired boy mutter something about flashy, popular bastards. You know him? Who doesn't? Issei replied quietly with a spiteful look. Kiba Yudo, Ku Academy's #1 best-looking prince. I don't apparently. Naruto noted dryly, never heard of him. I wouldn't have expected someone like you to. You're about as famous as him though, or rather, infamous. Issei remarked, Uzumaki Naruto, Ku Academy's biggest delinquent. You know, if we're going to be friends and everything, you might want to be a little nicer. Says the guy who wanted to let me die. Touché. How about I buy a lollipop for you as an apology? He sounded so sincere that Issei couldn't help but stare at him incredulously while Kiba led them into an inner chamber with a chuckle. Inside the lavish room, a small white-haired girl sat alone on a couch while she nibbled at some Japanese sweets. Her large, sleepy-looking eyes were rooted on them as the two of them awkwardly sat as far away from each other and everybody else, resolutely avoiding Kiba's gaze and the small girl's emotionless stare. Kaneko-chan, Kiba began introducing them to her after another quiet laugh. This is Hayato Issei-kun and the bigger one is Uzumaki Naruto. You too, this is Taja Kaneko-chan. Returning the small girl's light acknowledging nod with one of his own, Naruto satisfied himself by unashamedly poking around the room like a country bumpkin, looking all for the world as if he had never seen anything so obscenely extravagant. Which was sort of true, but they didn't need to know that. From the other room, they heard the sound of water cascading down a drain, as if someone was having a shower, obviously making Issei even more nervous as he gave his blonde companion a look every once in a while, wishing that Naruto would at least look a little nervous or ashamed at his embarrassingly open inspection of the furniture. It didn't take long for Akino and Rias to make their appearance from the other room. The red-haired princess took a seat at the head of the table while Akino bustled around the table, serving everyone a hot cup of tea before she made her way to the head of the table, standing attentively beside her club president, only giving the blonde who had the gall to completely ignore both of them a glare every now and then. I'll get to the point right away. After everyone had nodded their thanks for the beverage, Kaneko's with a slightly pained look due to her burned tongue, Rias began. Her long, soft crimson hair ran down the front of her dress like a stream of hot blood. We are all devils. Issei gulped. Naruto was poking at a painting and wondering if it made good firewood. The nights here tended to get rather cold after all, quite unlike his home where it was permanently sweltering. We, the devils, have been at war with the fallen angels since ancient times. We have been fighting over the possession of the underworld, which is also known as hell in the human world. The underworld is split into two areas, one for devils and one for fallen angels. The devils form pacts with humans and receive their sacrifices and increase their strength. The fallen angels on the other hand control humans to eliminate devils. And then, to make matters worse, we have the angels whose sole purpose is to destroy these two races on God's orders. The three factions make up the Great War which has been going on since ancient times. As they began talking about Issei's murderous ex-girlfriend, the blonde boy only kept half an ear on the conversation as he edged around the room, more interested in the upholstery. That and ignoring Rias obviously annoyed the black-haired one, which was all good as far as he was concerned. He could even hear the sound of wood creaking under her grip as she clutched at the chair to stop herself from bodily lunging at him. Though in retrospect, he probably wouldn't mind. Teasing one of the two girls who were upheld by a majority of the academy as the very epitome of feminine aristocratic perfection was something of a pastime for him. As the conversation turned to their new duties as Rias servants, something about going out and granting wishes for humans, acquiring the power of their desires as fuel for their powers, the blonde finally had had enough. That's all right. Naruto spoke up, causing everyone stare at him for cutting Rias off halfway. I'll have to say no to that. I kinda already have a job. Rias, who didn't seem put off at all by his interruption, only gave him a concerned look. Are you sure? At the moment, your base powers are pretty low. If you don't start now, you may never graduate as a higher devil. That's right, Naruto-san. Issei said with a glint in his eyes. You can get your own harem, you know. He was so excited by the prospect of his own harem that he forgot to be rude to the blonde. Naruto gave the boy a disturbed look. That's alright, I think I'll be just fine without a group of girls continuously looking after my every whim and desire as they surrender their bodies to me to do whatever I want with. Issei looked like he had been slapped as the blonde casually blasphemed his religion. On the other side of the room, the chair finally surrendered to Akino's grip and splintered as she shot upwards. But before she could speak her mind, Rias laid a calming hand on her friend's arm. It's alright, Akino. He'll understand his mistake when the time comes. I only hope it won't be too late. Don't worry, I won't. Naruto replied in an unconcerned manner before adding, by the way, I don't suppose you want that chair anymore, right? Rias glanced at the broken piece of furniture and found a small laugh bubbling form inside her at his strange request. Fufufu, it's alright. You can have it. Thanks. That will do nicely. Happily, Naruto quite politely stepped around Akino and hefted the broken chair onto his shoulders and left with a cheerful whistle. It was roughly a week later that Naruto was roughly brought back to reality by an unpleasant messenger. Holding one kerchief to her nose, Akino looked around the shabby ramen shop with undisguised disdain. Is Uzumaki-san here? I was told that he works part-time here. The old owner, a dawdling old man who could barely straight anymore, found that other parts of his body worked fine as he stared at the beautiful, raven-haired Yamato Nadeshiko. His gums opened and closed soundlessly. It's alright, Oya-san. The blonde calmly led the old man back into his shop with a resigned expression. I'll handle this. Returning back to the front of the shabby store, Naruto gave the raven-haired girl a dry look. Can I help you? There's something on tonight. Bucho wants you to properly see something before it's too late. Can I? No. Akino cut him off shortly. She explicitly told me to wait here and make sure you arrive in time. Well, there goes my early night then. When should I get ready? You can get ready now. The blonde pinched the bridge of his nose tiredly. Give me 10 minutes while I let the owner know I have something I need to do. As she gave him a severe nod, the blonde bustled back into the bowels of the shop. It didn't take him long to persuade the old man that he had something urgent to do, though Naruto suspected that it had more to do with the fact that he made the blonde promise to bring his beautiful little friend back to the shop as often as possible. A few minutes later, the blonde made his reappearance with his apron hung over one shoulder and dressed in his school uniform again. Wrinkling her nose at the offensive smell from his apron, Akino made sure to stay at least 5 paces away from him as the two of them trekked down the road as a resigned Naruto followed behind the vice president of his not-so-voluntary club. You'd be a lot more pleasant if you smiled a little more, you know. Naruto commented idly. Imagine the mass heartbreaks that would occur if anyone from our school saw you with that frown. And you'd be a lot more pleasant as well if you didn't come quite so near me. If I didn't know any better, I'd think you didn't like me. The blonde muttered under his breath. Unfortunately, her sharp ears, enhanced by nightfall, heard him quite clearly. No. She whirled around with a hard look on her beautiful face. No, I don't. Why though? Naruto asked with an air of innocent curiosity as the two of them stopped in the middle of the road. A stiflingly oppressive atmosphere hung above the two of them. You've never gotten this angry at me before, though it's almost as amusing. Even Issei, as perverted as he was, got a far warmer reception from the vice president of the occult club. In fact, Naruto had lost count of the number of times Akino would lean forward, putting her significant cleavage on display, and make an innuendo, causing the poor pervert to gush blood from the nose over the past week. It was a minor miracle the younger boy was not dead from severe anemia yet. That and the fact that he was a devil. I don't care if you don't like the situation you are currently in fact, I could accept it if you refuse to listen to us because of your denial. Akino stalked towards him with a fire burning in her bosom. The problem here stems from the fact that you aren't in denial. You accepted everything quite easily, but it's the way you accepted it so nonchalantly before brushing it off as unimportant, almost like a fly off your shoulder, even though Bucho has made every effort to welcome you into our family, even specifically asking for your presence today so that you will understand your mistake. I don't care if you spit on me, but if you spit on her kindness, you will have to deal with me. Even if I don't want her to be kind to me? Naruto asked with one raised eyebrow at the sparks running off her skin. Especially if you don't want her to be kind to you. Akino hissed quietly. Just answer me one thing. He gestured at this body with a mildly irritated expression as if he was trying to wave off a fly. I'd been feeling it ever since I was resurrected. A certain urge to be obedient to her. To acquiesce to her wishes. There was no need to elaborate who that her was, since she knew exactly who he was referring to. There's no way out of this. Akino pursed her lips. While she would not show it, she was mildly impressed. A devil that had been resurrected would be forever loyal to the one who had done the resurrecting. Their ability to decide would be slowly shaven away and eroded until it was replaced by obedience to their king in order to ease them into accepting their situation. It was not something that was generally advertised by the peers, and by the time most people found out, it rarely made a difference anyway because their king's opinion was now their opinion as well. It was an insurance policy of sorts. Incidents where newly resurrected devils went insane or rebelling out of anger at having that choice taken from them had been far too common for anyone's comfort during the early days of the raiding game's establishment. Things only really settled down after the policy had been introduced to reduce casualties and help devils adjust to their new life. Some of the more humane nobles, however, refused to assert that authority, and tried to allow their peerage a measure of independence, mostly because a peerage that could still actively think on their own and take independent action would beat a bunch of zombies hands down any day of the week, but the passive effect that changed the peerage's minds to be more accepting of the situation would always be there. But to identify the compulsion to obey only 2 days into his new life and then ignore it? It was not something anyone could do. Only someone who had a will of tempered iron, and was comfortable enough with his own psyche to acknowledge his own flaws, could do it. Or someone whose ego was big enough to crush a person from 40 feet away. Aquino was inclined to believe the blonde standing before her fell into the latter category. None, she finally said, unless she voluntarily releases you, but she can only do that once you have served the minimum number of years. Aquino replied curtly, until then, your life is now bonded to hers as much as mine is. You can still be a peer and gain a title, but in the end, you are beholden to her just as your own pieces will be until you are released. The blonde seemed to mull on that thoughtfully before directing a remarkably penetrating gaze at her. Did you pass away as well? That is something I would like to consider none of your business, she remarked frostily. Naruto smiled wryly, and here I thought we were making progress in our relationship. Just walk, Uzumaki-san. The blonde smiled faintly, perfectly content to amble along behind Aquino. To the academy, she was the perfect, elegant Wani-sama with no flaws. To her peers and other devils, she was the teasing seductress and confident queen of Rias Gremory. Behind that, he supposed, was someone who deeply respected someone who by all accounts had the power and authority to order her to do any number of degrading acts, but offered her friendship and companionship instead. Which was why she would willingly go to the ends of the earth for said friend regardless of compulsion to obey. He didn't hate people like that. He then spent a few moments gazing at the swaying hips in front of him. The fact that Aquino had a very nice ass probably helped. As the two individuals crest the last hill, Rias had to blink as the slightly taller of the two sent her a lazy wave. She felt a slow smile spread across her lips and nodded regally as Naruto and Aquino finally joined the small group waiting outside an abandoned house. Something had changed, she didn't know what, but it was encouraging for the young devil. Perhaps it had been right for her to send his classmate to get him after all. The entire occult research club was standing outside what seemed like a desolate abandoned building on the outskirts of town. Leaving the blonde's side, Aquino stepped up beside Rias calmly and began to explain it for the newcomer's benefit. Yesterday we received an order from the Archduke. There's an exiled demon in Rias-sama's territory, and as the demon's officially in charge of this area, it's our job to terminate it, and we have tracked it down to this place. To terminate it? A sly smile appeared on the red-haired she-devil's lips. Yes. This will be a good chance to show the both of you how demons seriously fight. Arching an eyebrow at the placid blonde, she continued, maybe then some of you will take your job more seriously as well. Wait, are you serious? Issei stuttered. I'm positive that I won't be of much use. Yes. It's still impossible now, even though you have ran a few tasks. Both of you are still at the level of a slightly stronger than average human. Issei's shoulders slumped down in despair at being told so bluntly that he was useless while Naruto merely huffed. That being said, you can still watch what a devil's battle is like. The reed-headed president of the occult club tipped her chin as if just only thinking of something. Oh yes. I will also explain the traits the servants have. Explain? The traits servants have? The newest members of the club shared an equally confused look, but the president continued speaking anyway. Devils who become a master can give certain traits to those who will become their servants. Yes, it's probably about time I explain about it and the history of devils. There was a three-sided war between the devils, the fallen angels, and God and his heavenly hosts. All three sides had a large army, and they fought for almost eternity because all three sides were so evenly matched. As a result, all three sides lost most of their troops, and the war finished several hundred years ago with no side winning. Kiba continued after Bucho. The devils were no exception. High-ranking devils with peerage who commanded about 20 or 30 troops lost most of their underlings because of the war. At the time, a majority of all the armies of hell consisted of what we call pure-blooded demons, but because of the high amount of deaths among the demon population, demons with rank and titles couldn't even form new armies any longer. He smiled vaguely. To be honest, I'm pretty new as well, but I heard that most of the pure devils passed away in that war. But even after the war, there are still problems between the devils, the fallen angels, and God. Even though the fallen angels and God's side suffered similar losses, we are still in a position where we can't let our guard down or else we will be in trouble. Then Bucho spoke again. Thus the devils decided to use a system to form a small group of soldiers. And that is the evil peace. In other words, all three sides screwed each other over a war that happened eons ago, and you are now reduced to hiring mercenaries to fight the battle for you because you either don't want, or can't stop fighting. Naruto concluded blandly. That is a fairly accurate summary of the situation, Rias admitted with a slightly shamefaced expression, prompting Akino to give him a hard look before she continued for her president. As Bucho was saying, devils with peerage decide to use the traits of the humans gained chess to their servant devils. There was a certain irony to the whole situation because most of the servants are devils that were reincarnated from humans, in other words half-bloods. Since then chess became a popular game in the world of the devils. We'll leave that aside. Devils who are masters are given the rank of king. In our case that is me. From there they created 5 special traits which consisted of the queen, rook, bishop, knight and pawn. Since they couldn't make an army, they decided to have a small number of devils and the system would give them enormous powers in order to compensate. This system was made in the past few hundred years ago, and became unexpectedly popular amongst devils with peerage as a form of entertainment, as well as a method of settling conflicts without exaggerated losses. Popular? You mean the chess rule? They started to compete against each other. For example like, my knight is stronger, or no, my rook is stronger. As a result high-class devils started to play a game like that of chess against each other using their servant devils. We call it the rating game. Anyway, this game became very popular amongst the devils. Now there are even tournaments for it. The strength of their pieces and also how strong they are at the game affects the devil's social position and their peerage. There is a thing called Piece Collect where they gather humans with talents and make them into their pieces. It is very popular recently. To sum it up, the more talented their servants are and the better they do in these rating games, the better their status in our society. Issei nodded slowly. I see. So being an influential player in that game means that you are a splendid devil. It also becomes your pride then. And at the moment many of the servants' devils have now or former humans, and they function by becoming pieces in the game. I feel it's complicated. So will I be someday forced to fight in that game? I'm not a mature devil yet, so I can't participate in a formal tournament. Even if I could, there are things that I need to do first or else I can't play. In short, none of you will be participating in a game for a while yet. So none of you have ever tried one yet? The blonde asked curiously. That is correct, although we have watched a match or two. Akino agreed. Issei smiled tiredly. The world of devils is unexpectedly strange. I used to imagine them being evil and scary, but it looks like my imagination was incorrect. Or maybe I feel like that because I'm still ignorant of the ways of the devil's world. Before that there is something that is bothering me. He looked at his beloved president, Bucho. What is my role and traits? And what piece am I? She was stopped before she could say anything else by a loud crashing footstep. Just as their group crossed over the threshold a certain presence flooded the area. It was all Issei could do not to fall to his knees under the onslaught of such an intense intent to kill. Kukuku, I can smell something disgusting. But I can also smell something delicious. Is it sweet? Or is it sour? A low eerie voice which sounded like it was coming from below the ground echoed around the Abaddon building's interior. Completely unfazed Rias stepped forward and loudly declared, Exiled Devil Vizer. We are here to eliminate you. Quack 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 quack. The abnormal laughter echoes around them. From the shadows, a grotesque thing slowly stepped out as if savoring Issei's fear. I can help. It's alright to sit this one out for now, Naruto. Waving at her followers, Naruto and Issei were promptly shuffled to the very back of the hall where they were the closest to the exit just in case things went sour. Though not as sour as the blonde's expression. As the battle began, Naruto found his attention wandering again while the crimson-haired princess began explaining all the roles and attributes those roles granted them. As the battle reached its climax and the crimson-haired ruined princess finished the exiled demon off with a gigantic mass of black demonic power that seemed to devour Vizer's very existence, the invigorated girl spun around, clearly expecting to see pride on her new pawn's faces. Issei was clearly filled with admiration, however the blonde was nowhere to be seen. Naruto-san? Her voice echoed in the aftermath of the battle. What? Yelping, she spun around with a jump at the blonde's irritated voice, only to see him poking at the dead demon with one toe. She couldn't be sure, but she could have sworn she saw him removing something from the corpse before he hid it away. That of course paled in comparison with the very large pile of broken items that he was carrying on his back. Are you looting the place? She asked incredulously. The blonde shrugged the heavy backpack improperly. Where did he even get that? Why not? It's not like anyone's going to miss them, right? Were you even listening to anything I said? Yeah. Yuto has some sort of weird sword creation ability that complements the speed boost he gets as a knight, otherwise he'd only be fast with no power to show for it. The blonde waved dismissively as he continued to poke around in the abandoned building's dark corners for any goodies he could loot. Meanwhile, the rook's power and defensive attributes covered Chibi Nico-chan's natural fragility, as she complements them with her natural grace and speed. Peripherally, Rias felt Kaneko twitch slightly at the new title that had been bestowed upon her. Not entirely sure what the queen and king get, but I assume it's just reserve boost since both of you are pretty heavily focused on jutsus to begin with, while the pawns don't get squat until they rank up or increase their own base abilities. Jutsus? Spells, or whatever you call them here. Oh look, a skull. She gaped at the blonde who began juggling a pair of picked clean skulls around, not entirely sure if she was offended by how he found the skull more interesting than a devil's fight, annoyed by how he had accurately assessed their techniques while he clearly wasn't paying any attention, or just plain amused by his childish antics. Then Naruto had to go and spoil it by gleefully adding, "Now I don't need to find anything to decorate my new home." She face-palmed, "Put the skulls down, Naruto." "What? But I juggle." He did not whine. He had been the commander of a freaking army, however brief that particular stint had been. Commanders did not whine. But a small bit of pleading and pouting never hurt negotiations. "Put them down, Naruto," she repeated firmly. "I'll lend you the money to get some nice ribbons." The blonde whimpered, "How about those ribs I found? They're like half a ribbon each." "No. Bones." The blonde deflated and Rias had to resist the urge to coo at the defeated look in those blue orbs. "Okay." Rias sighed exasperatedly as she signaled to Akino to start the clean-up. "What am I going to do with you?" The blonde shrugged as he observed the other pieces congregating near the corpse, talking about some inane matters no doubt. Carelessly tossing the skull aside, the blonde hopped onto a broken pillar and crossed his legs easily. "To be blunt, there's probably nothing you can do, or rather, nothing you can offer me." He paused at a sudden commotion as Issei accidentally slipped on a pool of blood. Anyone else probably would have just gone and broke their nose on the floor. Issei, proving that he had the luck of a main character from a eki manga, somehow managed to rip Kiba's pants off when he pitched forward before kissing the corpse full on the lips. The squeal emanating from the Bishinen swordsman was surprisingly girly. His lips twitched as he thought back to a similar incident in his youth, though he was exceedingly thankful he had not managed to tear his kissy's pants off. He would have had to gnaw his hands off. The fangirls would probably then worship his dismembered limbs. "I take that back. Your pawn is stupidly hilarious. I'm going to stick around just to see how many people he can molest just by falling down." Ria's sweat dropped, Issei's miraculous timing aside. "Are you saying that you will not acknowledge me as your king?" "I never said that." The blonde countered smoothly. "Even if I did not ask you to, you did revive me and I'm not so ungrateful that I would ignore that completely, so I guess that does make you my king in a way. However, just because you are my king does not automatically mean I have to be loyal to you." His lips twisted sharply. "It's not rare to see a king toppled by peasants after all. Until then, I obey you in form alone." "That sounds like a challenge." The red-haired girl smirked at him. "You wish to take my place?" Naruto winked at her. "I think you would enjoy serving under me." Rias rolled her eyes. It was not the first time someone had propositioned her, to be honest, but coming from the blonde, it was clear that he had not meant a single word. In fact, chances were if he really were to somehow get his own peerage, he'd probably ask them all to go and do whatever they wanted as long as they left him alone. "Somehow, I think you and Akino are going to be good friends," Rias noted dryly. The blonde shot her a mischievous smile. "Who says we aren't? We've known each other for about 2 years or so now already." The blonde shrugged easily. "She's a beautiful woman in a traditional kind of way, has impeccable taste and grace beyond her years. So it's easy to see why she is my class president, why half the bloody males in the school drool whenever she passes by, and why she is one of Ko Academy's 2 great One-Isamas, which is a really embarrassing title by the way." Rias flushed a little at that, and naturally, as the single biggest delinquent in her class, it was her job to try and get my grades up to par or hunt me down to make me to take part in school festivities. "So I guess you could say we're friends." "Sort of." He then shot her a mischievous smirk and whispered conspiratorially, "Of course, I already knew she wasn't that perfect, no one is." Needling her in class and taunting her to make her to drop that perfect One-Isama act was one of the few things I found made class a little bearable. This just happens to be yet another way I can see her all steamed up and panting over me. As far as I'm concerned, I prefer that a lot more than I like being friends with her. Very good friends apparently, the crimson-haired third-year corrected herself resignedly, with equally twisted senses of humor naturally. Already she could feel a headache developing behind her right eye. "Putting aside your apparent hobby of screwing with my queen's mind, I want to propose a wager with you." His eyebrows rose slightly. "A bet? On what?" "On your challenge." Her lips curled into a singularly confident smirk as she eyed the blonde. "As a whole, you're certainly nowhere as strong or useful as Kaneko, Kiba, Akino, or even Issei right now." Naruto's left brow twitched but he remained silent. Most devils, well almost all, only resurrect people that can be useful to them, which means that they would need to have a B rank or A rank sacred gear in them at the very least, like Issei, or have some interesting heritage like Kaneko. Rias admitted a little shamefully. I don't mind that, honestly. There's something primal yet inspiring about working your way up from being looked down and spat upon until you can punch them to the moon. Naruto did not miss the almost instinctive glance she had shot in Akino's general direction. But in order for me to help you get to that point, I need your loyalty. So I'm going to make you a bet. That depends on what you're willing to bet, Naruto replied lazily. He hadn't even known them all that long, or that many devils for that matter, but that confident self-belief seemed to be something of a common trait amongst them. You've got nothing I want. She laughed softly at his taunting tone. I'm sure that I'll figure something out, but by the end of this month, I will definitely make you acknowledge that I am king worthy of your loyalty. Naruto shot her an easygoing smile. Good luck with that. You don't mind if I want you to lose, right? Naturally. Is this really necessary? Oh? Is the great Uzumaki-sama whining? If I knew you were going to come and kick me up at bloody 4 a.m. in the morning, I'd never have told you where I stayed. After what you saw last night, I thought you'd be at least a bit more open to the idea. It appears that I was wrong. What is wrong with you people? Like it's not already bad enough that Rias wants me to go see her right after class, but now you as well? Akino suppressed the indignant urge to gnash her teeth at the uncooperative blonde. Look, I don't like doing this any more than you do. So just let me do what I came to do and I can leave you alone. Hopefully forever. The blonde peeked at her from behind his tree. You can always just leave it to be. I'll even lie to Rias if she asks, and tell her that you did a wonderful job. The girl touched her cheek thoughtfully for a moment before sighing. I can't, she said with a regrettable expression. I made her a promise a long time ago, to help her be the empress of raiding games. So as much as I'd prefer you to rot and die in a gutter somewhere because you were too stubborn to listen, I can't. When the time comes that you face your own death, she wants you to at least be able to come out of it alive, if not in one piece, so you can start getting stronger in earnest. If not for her, then for yourself, because the fact that you are now a devil won't change. Whether you like it or not, there are people out there who will kill you just for that. The blonde blinked a moment, then he tilted his head to the side and his face was completely blank. He looked like a complete simpleton as far as Akino was concerned. Then, surprising the queen, he sighed and slowly got up. All right. Let's get whatever this is over with then. This time it was Akino's turn to blink. What? The blonde chose not to reply, merely shrugging with a bored look on his face. Just like that? Naruto gave her an irritable look. Are you going to do whatever it is you woke me up at 4 a.m. for or not? Akino nodded slowly. This was quite possibly the first time the blonde had actually willingly cooperated with her, albeit somewhat reluctantly. It's just a few basic spells. Akino admitted they're not much, but from what little energy we can sense from you, it's probably all you can do, maybe 5 or 6 times before you exhaust yourself. Naruto's left eyebrow twitched again. Eyeing the blonde warily, she lifted her hand and a small glowing circle of light blinked into existence, before a tiny flame lit with a spark and danced about her palm. This one is a basic fireball. As the name implies, it's not much, she admitted. At most you'd probably be able to use it as a distraction. Once again the blonde tilted his head to the side, that annoyingly blank expression on his face. Well? Is that as big as it gets? Akino shrugged carelessly as she let the flame disappear. Pretty much. Oh, the blonde said blankly, and what if you put a bit more power into it? Her brow furrowed at the weird question. It gets a little hotter, I suppose. But after a certain point, it'll drain far more energy than necessary. It'd be a lot more efficient to simply just use a higher ranked fire spell. Though if you tried that now with the kind of reserves you have right now, you'd probably kill yourself in about 30 seconds from exhaustion. Ah. Her furrowed brow deepened as the blonde simply stared at her hand with that blank expression. She would have thought she was looking at a dead corpse if it was not for the strange glint in those eyes. Aren't you going to try to do it? What for? What for? I'm here to teach you a few basic spells. Akino spoke slowly, as if speaking to a baby. A big, blonde, stupid baby. By definition, that means you try to learn what I'm trying to teach you, doesn't it? That would be unnecessary. The blonde replied dismissively. What other spells were you planning on showing me? Akino found herself desperately praying to whatever god was out there to help her find the will necessary to not give in to her desire to fry the blonde with a well-deserved lightning bolt. With almost superhuman will, she wrenched herself back to reality and lifted up on foot. A similar circle of light exactly the same color as earlier appeared on the sole of her foot, before she almost daintily stomped on the ground. Naruto raised one eyebrow at the quaking and cracking of the ground beneath his feet. That was Quake. Akino practically growled out, a basic earth-type spell. The size of the quake depends on how hard you can hit the ground. As a queen, I'm about as strong as Kiba and Kaneko-chan, but that's about as much as I can do with it. That said, I'm not very good at close combat, so it's useful if I want to throw off someone's balance while I get away. The blonde looked somewhat more interested this time, but he still made no move to copy or try to learn the spell. Giving up, Akino simply cycled her way through a basic spell from the other 3 elements, and described a few basic scenarios where they would be useful. When she had offered to teach Issei some spells so that he could defend himself until his gauntlet charged up properly, the pervert had been grateful, to the point where he had almost gotten on his knees and thanked her even if he had been abysmally slow at even remembering the basic magic circles. When Kiba joined, he had been young, painfully so and utterly broken on the inside. But he had focused on learning anything she could teach, to get stronger, to get revenge, almost to the point of starving himself. Unlike Kiba, Kaneko had been calm, stony even, but even the blindest person would have been able to see the gratefulness shimmering in her eyes as someone finally cared for her as more than an experiment. The blonde in front of her, however, simply gave each spell the barest of dismissive glances. It was infuriating. Akino sighed with some relief as she finally finished. The blonde's blank face had tested her patience severely, but she was at least determined to do her best to fulfill Rias' expectations, even if her current student was not Inters. So we're done? Her patient snapped. Visibly snarling at the blonde, she stalked towards the man who was at least a head taller than her and significantly more muscled. Done? Done? Any stupid devil off the street can learn those party tricks, it's part of their nature. However, in most cases, pieces develop fighting styles based around their gifts, be it a sacred gear or a natural talent. People like you, without either, have to make do with the basic demonic arts if they wish to even have a chance of standing on equal terms. That's why devils prefer to just get one who already has an innate talent, it's far faster. The raven-haired girl glared at the blonde who was now smirking. The sheer gall of it made her honestly wish she could kill him. It takes years for them to get to a point where they can do that. On the way, they will bleed, they will cry, and they will tear themselves apart for that strength. And they will do it so that they won't be called useless, untalented, so their best friend won't get looked down by her own family and hated by those upstart bastards that call themselves nobles. She reared back and let her fist fly with an inarticulate yell, hoping to break that smirk off his face even if she could not kill him. The fist, with all her strength as a queen behind it, hit a palm. Her punch had somehow been stopped dead. She tried to rip it from his grasp, but he did not budge even a single centimeter. How long have we known each other now? 3 years? Akino narrowed her eyes at the blonde's whimsical question and futilely tried to wrench her fist from the blonde's surprisingly strong grip. Why? It doesn't matter at all. You've made that clear enough. It matters to me, because in that 3 years, that was the first truly honest thing you said to anybody. The blonde replied softly to the stunned girl who stumbled as he suddenly let her go, her anger completely leaving her as suddenly as it had come, as if his words had punched her in the gut. That said, I do think you're misunderstanding something. Naruto cocked his head with a small smile. Who said I wasn't learning? What? Naruto sighed and let go of her palm, as he began to walk around the clearing, seemingly looking for something. A fuming Akino watched as the blonde stopped before a huge tree whose trunk that looked like it could fit 10 of her easily. You say I am weak because you cannot sense anything in me. You say I am stupid because I do not reply. He turned around to look at her, a faintly cynical smile playing on his lips. You are not entirely wrong. He lifted one hand and a circle of light flashed around his fist, and Akino was surprised to see the blonde using fireball on his first try. Though she was certainly confused about what he was doing. The tree was huge, a fire that small wouldn't even singe its thick bark. But I am not weak because you think I am. The tiny flame, the weakly flickering light within the blonde that represented the amount of energy he had suddenly blazed into a bonfire that was almost blinding. Akino's eyes went as wide as dinner plates as the dancing fire in his hand suddenly began to multiply until there were more ghostly little white flames flickering in that little clearing than there were stars in the sky. He snapped his fingers. I am weak because I choose to be. Naruto, Rias said with a clipped tone as the two of them sat before a lavish-looking table. You should know her as Shirtori Sauna, but her real name is Sona Citri. She is a high-ranking devil and the next heir to the house of Citri. The blonde swept his bangs back so that he could get a better look at the strict-looking beauty who was giving him a measuring stare from behind her desk and nodded slowly. Glancing around the room, he easily concluded that the girls and boys who were all similarly dressed in crisp, sharp uniforms as they expressionlessly watched the three of them inconspicuously save the brown-haired boy of average height beside her who was giving him a rather suspicious look, were also more than likely fellow devils. Before he nodded, Sauna-san. Gremory-san. Uzumaki-san. She acknowledged with a regal nod of her own, this is an unusual meeting, but as it was requested by a good friend, what can I do for you today? To save time, Rias began with her usual bluntness. I need to know how Ni-san is connected with Naruto-san. Why was he given a scholarship? When she had resurrected the blonde, she had done so not expecting to receive anything but an average human as a new piece, and as much as she did not like to admit it, she had been afraid that she had drastically weakened her own position in future rating games by falling prey to her own emotions. After seeing the blonde basically manhandle a fallen angel with nothing but 2 saucepans and sheer guts, however, had caused her to revise her own opinions and admit that the blonde had potential as a knight. Or maybe even a rook. However, before she committed to anything further, she wanted to find out if there was anything else the blonde might have been hiding from her, enough to arouse her brother's interest at least, that she could use to her own advantage. She was not ashamed at all to admit that her ability to judge people fell far short from her brother's. If you're asking if he knew about devils before this, you can rest assured that he had no idea. The dark-haired girl commented, who the scholarship chooses is purely based on Gremory-sama's own whims, and he did not see fit to inform us of whatever criteria he used to select the receivers who are just as in the dark as we are. Considering the fact that I'm sitting right beside you, you do realize you could have just asked me, right? The blonde remarked dryly. There wasn't any need to stuff me into a stiff suit and drag me here for a meeting with our celebrated student council president. Would you have told me anything? If we were alone? Maybe. In front of her? He gave the student council president a significant look, highly unlikely. The boy narrowed his eyes as he puffed up his chest. Be careful how you go about talking about Citri-sama. You're just a gearless mongrel. Sharp blue eyes stared at the boy. Before they widened comically and Naruto theatrically pointed out the window, oh my god. Someone is stealing Kaisha-sama's underwear. What? Where? Naruto quite calmly leaned back into his chair as the brown-haired boy raced to the window and crashed through it with a valiant roar. Only to realize that they were on the 3rd floor, and he didn't exactly know how to fly yet. They heard the sound of him crashing to the ground, and a distant moan. You might want to send someone to get him to the infirmary, the blonde noted with a wry smirk. He's probably broken a leg or 2. Hopefully 2. Was that really necessary, Uzumaki-san? The Stuco president asked as she rubbed her temples, mentally making a reminder to erase the memory of Saji's little suicide attempt from anybody who had accidentally witnessed it, as well as punish the boy for being so reckless. Naruto shrugged indifferently. He was annoying me. How did you even get him to do that? Rias asked curiously. Perverts and idiots are usually the 2 easiest kinds of people to manipulate, the blonde commented wryly. All I had to do was find the source of his motivation, and the way he puffed up like a peacock for her benefit was as good a sign as any. Play Akino Arai, Unknown Vision. Rias sighed and directed her next question at Citri with a slightly complaining tone. You see my problem? He claims that he has never known about devils before, but he practically hit the ground running like he was born as one, even if he refuses to acknowledge it. A little. She agreed with a small smile. It wasn't often that she saw someone her age so in tune with human nature, to the point where he could send a reckless boy flying out the window with a single sentence. It's not that I'm going with the flow, Naruto pointed out with an honest confusion about why they were making such a big fuss about it. It's that I simply don't care. He spoke with some exaggerated jabs of his hand. So I found out that devils, fallen angels and angels exist. So what? Your fights and problems have nothing to do with me, or at least, I see no incentive to do anything about it just because someone caught me off guard with a strange attack that I wasn't expecting at all. I'll just do the bare minimum and spend the rest worrying about the interests of one person. Namely myself. Your life is usually incentive enough. That would certainly save time. He shrugged again before adding so quietly that Rias almost didn't hear him. Assuming I have anything to live for, that is. You mentioned you only cared about your own interests. What would that be? Women? Wealth? Wine? An intrigued Citri inquired. Do I really look like the type? Naruto asked with a chuckle. Then it still doesn't make sense. His crimson-haired princess noted with furrowed brows. You make sound as if you have no desire other than to live alone until you die. You're a devil. You have to have desires. No matter what she did, she couldn't understand how he saw the world. That lost gaze of his as he watched the world pass him by without any motivation to drive him. It was so pitiful. Maybe something more meaningful? Like knowledge? With the kind of grades he gets? Rias said dryly. Citri flipped through a log book on her desk with a frown. Uzumaki, she muttered under her breath until she reached the correct section when her eyebrows rose. Why don't I have a record about your middle school? Didn't you go to one? Not really, Naruto admitted carelessly. Where I came from, they only cared if I could read and count to 100. After that, I joined the family business. No wonder your grades are so abysmal. A huge chunk of your elementary school and middle school education is basically missing. Where are your Rias stopped mid-sentence as she saw something she had never seen before. The dark, stony look on Naruto's whiskered face told her that it would not be a good idea to ask about his family, so she abruptly changed the topic. I mean, what was the family business? Ass kicking. The blonde replied bluntly. Rias sighed exasperatedly. You have this absolutely wonderful gift of giving absolutely vague and useless answers. Not to mention it still doesn't explain why Nissan took an interest in you though. Really? I thought it explained a lot. Naruto noted blandly. Enlighten me? You mentioned before that devils look for talented humans to resurrect as soldiers. Pieces, Rias corrected him. Whatever. Point is, this is basically his family's territory and he wants mercenaries. Naruto paused and glanced at the two curious girls. What better way to do that than take control of an institution that nearly every human in the area has to experience as a way to monitor the masses for potential and give scholarships to the ones who stand out as a way to establish a connection or a sense of gratitude before you actually need them. Your grades are pretty horrible though. I said potential? Grades don't always translate to potential. He gave them a strange look. Trust me, I know. Business was very good back home. The two of them shared an uncomfortable look before Rias finally spoke, that was disturbingly cunning and calculative. Naruto had no sacred gears, no special powers nor any particular abilities outside of a slightly larger than average magic pool, which was actually rather strange considering he had even less than Issei on the day of his rebirth. But now that the reason for his abysmal grades had been cleared up, it was beginning to look like her brother had noticed Uzumaki Naruto for his strange mental agility. It certainly seemed like something the Demon Lord would do. If they could teach him some spells, he would make a devastatingly effective bishop. Though if one considered her other bishop's peculiarities, they would certainly make a strange combination. The blonde buffed his nails with a smug look as the crimson-haired girl gave him a dry look. Thank you. I do try when I can be bothered. Rias? Yes? I do not remember you telling me what piece Uzumaki-san is. That's because I didn't. With that kind of mental agility, he'd make a very good bishop. That's what I was thinking. Naruto noticed that the girl had not actually confirmed or denied her friend's statement. Nor did she dare to meet his gaze for some reason. Your newest bishop is certainly full of interesting ideas. Can I persuade you to lend him to me sometime in the future? I'll even trade you. Perhaps Tsubaki-san would be glad to make Kiba-san's acquaintance. Behind Sauna, the beautiful girl with a sword at her side and long raven tresses made a strangled squawk, then went bright red. Over my dead body, she promptly declared. Sauna gazed at her queen curiously. No? But I thought you would have liked it. After all, you won't stop staring at him. Naruto hadn't thought it possible, but the girl went even redder than possible. Her panicked gaze swept around the room. Seeing none of her friends even attempt to help her, mostly probably because they were busy snickering to themselves, the uptight young lady promptly ran out of the room with a surprisingly undignified wail. That was interesting, Rias noted with some amusement, but the answer does not change. It's not happening. As the two of them left the room, Rias could hear Sauna asking for someone to draft a budget and arrange a meeting with her father, who was apparently the director of Ko Academy. What will you do now? The blonde shrugged lazily. Relax somewhere, I suppose? I got the day off and nothing to do. Why not our club room? Your club room. Naruto corrected her succinctly. I never said I would join. Though she was slightly disappointed, she acknowledged his argument with a nod. The offer still stands. He was fully aware that she could have made it an order instead of an offer. The blonde shot her an exasperated look. You are annoyingly persistent, you know that, right? I've been told that before, yes. Rias admitted with a genial smile. So will you come to the club room? Naruto resisted the urge to groan and nodded, signaling his surrender. He didn't really have anything better to do anyway. I'll come with you then. I have some things to do there, the red-haired girl remarked cheerfully. While slouching blonde in front of her continued to walk at a slow shuffle with his eyes fixed on the sky, she found herself wondering again about how he looked at the world. As the door opened to the club room, they found it was empty save for a small white-haired girl with golden eyes. The girl who was munching on something sweet again stared at them emotionlessly before nodding. Gremory-senpai. Uzumaki-senpai. Uzumaki is fine. The honorifics get a little grating after a while and I can't be bothered to keep doing it myself, so you might as well drop it too. Naruto greeted her with a lazy wave as he pushed open the door. Do either of you want tea? Rias shot him an amused look. You can make tea? Shrugging, the blonde made his way to the cupboard where Akino usually kept the tea leaves. Deftly mixing it into a kettle before placing on top of a stove, he poured them both 2 cups of boiling hot tea within minutes. Carefully but elegantly, she took a sip from her cup before her eyebrows shot up. This tastes exactly like Akino's tea. I thought she wouldn't teach you. She didn't. Naruto agreed with a crooked smirk. What she did do, however, was mix it in front of me. The blonde replied dryly as he plucked Kaniko's cup from her hands, causing her to wrinkle her brows at him. After enough times, even someone as stupid as me can do it too if I watch carefully. I'm still saving up to get my own tea leaves though. Tap water gets boring after a while. Speaking of Akino, where is she? She was supposed to accompany you to meet me, but I haven't seen her around. Rias watched as the blonde seemed to automatically blow on the cup of tea a few times before he casually handed it back to the small cat-like girl. Blinking, she sipped on it, and a slow but beautiful smile appeared behind her sleepy expression like the sun rising from behind the clouds. Thank you? She spoke with a careful, measured pace. Himejima-senpai always makes it a little too hot for me. I know, Chibi-Nico. The blonde noted lazily before he kicked back on the sofa with a wide yawn. Rias hid her own smile behind her cup of tea as the blonde's hand almost seemed to subconsciously reach out and pet the small girl's head, causing her to purr quietly. We might have had a slight disagreement over the lessons. The blonde finally replied, even as he affectionately stroked the smaller girl's hair. Incidentally, nice try on getting me to join your club. So she told you that, did she? Her cheeks went a little red, but she kept her back straight and expression proud. Naruto knew her enough by now to understand that she was embarrassed about failing, not about being found out. I was taught to use everything within my reach to my advantage. The blonde shrugged and sagged back into the sofa. His eyes closed happily as he tried to get a nap. I can understand that much, I suppose. Did she tell you anything else? One blue eye opened slowly, and then his lips spread with a lazy smirk as the flushing girl tried her best to make it look like she wasn't interested in her answer, and failing miserably, maybe. She told me a lot of stuff after all. He winked at her with a knowing smile. Rias swallowed somewhat nervously. What stuff exactly? I don't know. Naruto shot back with a teasing smile. The kind of things do a handsome guy and his equally beautiful classmate talk about in the middle of nowhere are rather confidential, don't you think? I don't mind telling you, of course, but I certainly didn't expect you to have these kind of interests. The crimson-haired girl pursed her lips and sagged into her chair, either too proud or too embarrassed to continue asking. Naruto! Kaneko! Wake up! He felt a hand on his shoulders, shaking him awake. Hurry! What? Blue eyes opened blearily and the lithe blonde automatically stretched on the comfortable sofa while the white-haired girl curled up on her lap did the same with a loud purr. No time for that, you two. Hurry up and get ready. The whitish blur before his eyes slowly solidified into a worried-looking Yuro. Kiba? What's going on? Issei is in trouble. Himejima-senpai is already preparing the magic circle to port us there. The only ones who aren't ready are you two. His blue eyes traveled across the room to where a figure stood at the window, shadowed by the dim light from outside. It was obvious that the red-haired girl was upset, if not already seething. Helping Kaneko get up, he patted down her uniform and straightened it up for her, as she rubbed her eyes sleepily before he stood up and fixed his own shirt. We're ready. Let's go. He mumbled. He's still a little dazed by the hurried waking that he forgot to protest about being included in their group. The moment the five of them appeared on the other side of the gate, the smell of thick blood and excrement hit his nose. Barely giving the corpse nailed to the wall with its insides hanging out a passing glance, the blonde wrinkled his brows and carefully folded his handkerchief before he passed it to a stony-faced Kaneko. Out of all the devils there, she was the one who looked the most affected by the buckets of blood that seemed to have been splashed against the walls like grotesque paint. Giving him a discreetly thankful look, the small girl clutched the folded handkerchief to her sensitive nose. In front of them, Issei was half sprawled on the floor. Sweat ran down his face as he tried to suppress the pain from the two sizzling holes in his thigh while two people that he had never seen before stood on the other side of the room. What a vulgar mouth. Rias began bluntly with a disgusted look at the strange-looking boy who couldn't be any older than Kiba. It's hard to believe that someone like you can be considered a father of the cloth. You're a stray exorcist, aren't you? Yeah. I'm vulgar. Sorry about that. That's because I strayed away. I was kicked out. The thin, lanky man in black priestly robes cackled. That's why, screw the Vatican. I'm alright as long as I get to cut devils whenever I feel like it. This was the point where Naruto obviously began to lose interest, and he was about to wander away when he felt someone's hand clamping onto his wrist. He looked straight into Akino's sparking violet eyes. Bucho told me to make sure you listen properly this time. She was smiling, but her very being existed a cold hostility, though this time, it wasn't aimed at him, but at the strange boy. You are the type that is the most hard to deal with. Someone who feels like they are living by cutting devils, the one who causes the most harm to us. Hoa. You know, I don't want to be told off by a devil. I'm trying to live now just like other people. I'm not in a position where pests like you can talk down to me. Even devils have rules. And why should an exorcist care about the rules of someone beneath him? Then disappear. Rias breathed coldly before there was a loud explosion. The priest jumped away with a loud whistle as the spot he had been standing on scant seconds ago was swallowed by a dark orb. Nice. I like those passionate eyes. Wani-san, you are the best. I can feel your urge of wanting to kill me. Is this love? No. I think it's a killing intent. Superb. This is great. I love the feeling of intending to kill and getting intended to kill. I'm sure we can accommodate you. At least that was what he said, but even someone as mad as him probably noticed that he was outnumbered. With the seething Rias keeping him on his feet with her magic and Kiba's flashing blade, the exorcist was slowly driven into a corner. Oh, the two of you are sure fierce. Is it because you're angry that I shot your comrade? The priest taunted them. Who's the one that's sticking it in, and who's the one bending? So are all of you guys in that sort of relationship? So hot. Bucho, we have to finish this fast. More fallen angels are already coming to this house. Akino said before Kaneko added her own 2 cents. I can also hear the sounds of sirens coming here. Very well. Her hands slowly rose and she began rapidly throwing balls of demonic power, to the point where Kaneko wondered how the house was still standing. NGH. His fear of dying finally overcame his battle lust as the exorcist realized that he was seriously outnumbered. Throwing a bottle of clear water at the red-cloaked devil, he cackled once as the water hissed and steamed on Rias' body. See you, idiots! Before grabbing Asia violently and jumping towards the window. In slow motion, they watched as the exorcist's feet left the ground, dragging a forlorn-looking Asia behind him. They sailed through the air and crashed through the window, right after a shadow appeared behind the clear glass. On the other side of the glass, the shadow turned out to be a head of bright yellow hair that had suddenly stood up triumphantly as he waved his new discovery. I found 2 golf clubs. Back to the inside of the room, the exorcist's eyes light up with horror as he realized what was about to happen right before it did. There was a loud smack as Fried hurtled into the blonde and all 3 of them went down in a tangle of limbs and groans. Fried's eyes crossed as he fell on his face, clutching his family jewels in terrible pain. Why, he gasped painfully as his bravado deserted him. Is your head so hard? More like, who the hell jumps out of windows like? Don't you know you could have seriously hurt me? The offended blonde retorted. He knows that's a stray exorcist, doesn't he? Rias asked her best friend with a strange calmness that had replaced her earlier rage. Somehow, people who antagonized Naruto always ended up in a bad place, even if he just seemed to be bumbling around the place. Akino's eyes flicked to her side where the blonde was supposed to be and she pursed her lips. Keyword being supposed. I think he does. At least, I'm fairly sure he was still here for the first 10 minutes or so. She really should stop being surprised by anything he did now. Letting go of the lamp with an embarrassed expression, she half wondered when the blonde had found the time to escape her clutches and go wander off again as she stood rooted to the spot along with everybody else, listening to the surreal conversation with incredulous expressions. They heard Naruto's distinct baritone warble as he continued, "And why are you fondling yourself in public?" He spluttered with one hand rubbing the lump at the back of his head where it had abruptly stopped Fried mid-leap. Pervert. There was a loud thud, then a long drawn-out wheezing gurgle. Issei swore he could hear Fried sobbing into the ground. No. Don't kick him in the crotch. Okay. Then they heard the sound of something metallic cracking on flesh. Why did you do that? Asia asked shrilly as Fried began blabbering. You told me to stop kicking the pervert. The blonde replied plainly, so I did. You hit his crotch with a golf club. Asia squealed in a panic, what if he's permanently injured? Good point. Let me make sure. There was the sound of something whistling through the air, then another crack. Oh God, it's bent. Yeah. You bent my new golf club. I wasn't talking about that. Everybody there who considered himself a male crossed their legs with a terrified wince. No. Stop. Just stop hurting him. Okay. Go help me. There was some more shouting and squealing when Naruto spoke again with a note of satisfaction there. Done. You monster. You said you would stop hurting him. The male blonde actually managed to sound curiously innocent and insulted at the same time, but I didn't. Naruto pointed out reasonably, he obviously enjoyed it. See that white stuff? That didn't mean you have to. They could almost hear Asia blushing furiously. Put them up there, she said in a tiny whisper. Don't worry. It'll come out with some lubricant. There was a long pause. Okay, I lied. A lot of lubricant. Lying is bad. Shouldn't you be more worried about the pervert? Oh right. He's going to die. What should I do? Feed him a bottle of cooking oil and wait. There was an embarrassed squeak as Asia fled from the blonde's words with burning ears. It'll come out just like that, plop. Naruto relentlessly called after the 2 figures running away into the darkness. Or rather, one running while she helped the other one hobble, so make sure you're not standing at the wrong end when it does. Rias stifled a giggle. The Uzumaki sounded so innocent, as if he was honestly trying to help Asia but didn't quite seem to realize that he was only making things worse. It just made the entire situation even more insane than it already was. There was some silence before the grumbling blonde reappeared in the open doorway. I thought you said you found 2 golf clubs, Rias observed with some amusement. I did. Naruto's eyes nonchalantly flicked in the direction of the window. The weirdo liked them so much I gave it to him. In exchange, he gave me these. You mean he dropped it when you nailed him between the legs? Kiba noted with a weak watery smile that matched his ashen face as he shielded his family jewels from the other blonde, as if his very presence threatened the existence of his future family. I didn't nail anybody in the balls. The blonde corrected Kiba with a polite smile. He nailed himself. Everything after that was just me doing my duty as an upstanding citizen to punish a pervert fondling himself in public. Grasping the hilt-like thing, he casually waved the exorcist's sword of light when it appeared with a buzz. His face lit up with earnest curiosity before he gave Rias a pleading look. Can I keep this? I've always wanted a night light. Anything else you want to pick up while we're here? She remarked quite dryly while she internally tried to work out how the sword of light was working for the devil. Clearly, she was getting used to dealing with Akino's bizarre classmate. Can I take the co? No, you may not take the corpse home. I meant that there was a myth pause couch. Sure you did. Incidentally, do you even have enough space for the couch? I knew I was forgetting something. Play Yumi Hamasaki, life. Naruto sighed as he leaned back into the blood-soaked sofa that he had claimed for himself at the club room. A wet piece of cloth and liberal application of perfume had done wonders to the piece of furniture, though it certainly didn't help his image if the way the other devils had kept staring at the way the blonde lounged on the sofa, unmindful of the reek of bloody iron, was any indication. At any rate, they didn't stay long, seeing as it was already late when the earlier incident had happened, and the room was nearly empty, with only himself and Rias still there. Everyone had already left for the night, or at least he figured they did after a rather uncomfortable showdown between Rias and Issei. Was I too harsh on him? Rias said quietly, as if she was asking the air itself. For denying him the chance to save a girl he might have feelings for? Naruto pretended to ignore her slight flinch as he answered her question with the same nonchalant air, knowing that she was referring to her earlier altercation with her pawn about his desires to involve himself further with the fallen angel faction in order to rescue his friend. Something that Rias had strenuously objected to. The blonde gave the crimson-haired princess a measured look, and he had to admire her for what he saw. Anyone else might not have noticed the slight trembling of her clenched left fist, or the fact that her heart was beating slightly twice as fast as normal. They would not have noticed the way her pupils were dilated, strained from the effort of glaring at the innocuous document on the table, or the way the rustling cloth under the table told him that she had been repeatedly crossed and uncrossed her long legs. All of that told him that all she genuinely wanted to do was agree with her pawn and then be there leading the charge with him so that he could be happy. I don't know, he finally said. Why not? You're smart, aren't you? Rias shot back, a little rudely. The blonde ignored her tone and waved at her. Come over here. What? Just come. With a reluctant look, she sank into the couch beside him. Her back was as straight as any iron rod and her weariness was well hidden. Silently, Naruto reached out to fold back her left sleeve, revealing a patch of burned skin where the exorcist had splashed some sort of liquid earlier. How interesting. What was in that bottle? Acid? He inquired curiously. Rias ignored the mutter and tried to pull back her arm with a wince, but his grip was surprisingly strong. It was holy water. It's harmful to all demons, but nothing to someone like me. Something like that won't stay for long, she said with her usual dismissive elegance. Probably. Naruto replied conversationally and then completely ignored everything she had said as he ran one finger along the rough surface of the dark red burn. Logically speaking, you were right to deny him that chance. Naruto continued their earlier conversation suddenly. From what I can see, the peace between the two factions is pretty tenuous at best. The two sides are practically snapping at each other from behind a very thin line. You do not currently have any way of knowing if she was playing on Issei's kindness the way his stabby ex-girlfriend was, or if converting her to our side is worth it. If Issei fights, your honor would require that you to fight, and they would respond just as forcefully. However, you and your peerage are only a few people and would inevitably lose, if not suffer significant casualties. Dipping into his pockets, he pulled out a strange canister and flicked the top open. Tapping it carefully, he sprinkled some sort of ground dust onto her skin, and Rias blinked as a wonderfully soothing numbness spread over her hand. That would in turn not only bring in your brother, who seems to be quite influential, and since I'm fairly sure that not all devils are as caring as you, everybody else who is just asking for a reason, any reason to start a fight again. Depending on how many people agree with your current opposition, I can foresee only several results, most of which involve you and your allies horribly injured or dead. He nodded at her slowly. If I were a commander, I would have done what you did because I did not have enough information to justify if she is worth risking a full-blown war between the devils and the fallen angels. And you deduced all this from just watching us? You and Sona Citri, to be precise. She flicked her limp hand with a strange look. She couldn't feel it at all. What was that anyway? Normal human anesthetic shouldn't work on devils, so how come yours does? I have thick skin, so my anesthetic, naturally, has to be somewhat more potent. Naruto evaded the question with a lazy smile as he replaced the canister into his pocket. He did not think it was necessary to mention that because of his QB-enhanced immune system, he had to create progressively stronger drugs every time his system developed an immunity to the current version. The one in the canister was the 356th version of one anesthetic and far as he could tell, was more than enough to kill an elephant with one dosage. He decided not to mention that either. Just don't ask what's in it. You don't want to know. Trust me. You don't have to make it all sound so nice just to assure me you know. He gave her an amused look. What makes you think I care enough to worry about your feelings? It really was as simple as it sounded. You simply made a logical prediction with all the knowledge you had. Speaking from the perspective of someone who has to bear the burden of 1,000 people, the people will always win out over the one idiot's puppy love. Still feels horrible. She swayed in her seat and found herself having a hard time focusing. I'm not sure if that's just me or what that stuff you sprinkled on me though. Naruto chuckled and pressed her down so she was lying down in the most comfortable position on his lap. Of course it would. On the other hand, we can look at it from Issei's point of view. Naruto continued speaking in that same clinical tone. He was just resurrected and he hasn't known any of you all for very long, nor does he actually know any of you. He does not know the troubles and worries that plague all of you. There is a faint but fragile emotional bond that probably just got cracked earlier. Naruto continued to talk about it with the air of someone making small talk as he soothingly ran one hand through her long red locks. Meanwhile, even though you've been in contact with him longer than the blondie, he seems to know her marginally better than he does you, and he at least suspects that he has feelings for her, so it all boils down to which one holds more weight with him. Plus, the two sides might have been at each other for so long that they've forgotten how this war even started in the first place. To Issei, a new devil who has not seen the true extent of the war, who has not lost anything to this fight and has seen the more reasonable side of the fallen angels in the form of Asia, the whole thing probably reeks of a pointlessly childish fight. In other words, we're ahead of Asia, but only by a bit? She queried quietly, peering up at the blonde's chin. Roughly, Naruto agreed with a nod. The next time he has to make this choice again, the outcome will not be the same. She watched him carefully with ruby eyes. If I asked you how to make him more agreeable to us, what would you do? Theoretically? The blonde thoughtfully scratched at the light stubble on his chin. The simplest way would be to assassinate Asia Argento, and let him believe that the fallen angels did it. The blonde smiled cynically. Then he will burn with the same anger all of you devils seem to have and throw himself into the fight with everything he has. That's how you really see us, don't you? Rias observed with narrowed eyes, pointlessly fighting each other. That's why you simply don't care about what we do, because to you, both sides are equally stupid. Pretty much. There are other reasons, of course. Naruto admitted indifferently. I haven't seen many nice fallen angels yet, but I don't entirely believe that every single one of them are insane the same way I know not all devils are nice people. He shrugged with a faint smile. Even if there are people who just want to watch the world burn, they are the only ones that should be cut off. The crimson-haired princess sighed tiredly and swayed as the anesthetic seeped through her skin. So what should I do? She said, with not a little desperation coloring her tone. Looking down at the girl on his lap, he smiled faintly. Despite all her bravado, she was still a young girl struggling to take on the mantle of a king. I cannot decide that for you. It is, and will always be your choice and your choice alone. He told her bluntly before smiling gently as he thought of Akino. But if it's any consolation, you have many friends who will stay by your side, no matter the mistakes you will make. Rias blinked. Through the increasingly foggy haze that was her mind, a faint suspicion sparked itself into existence. The blonde was testing her. Of that, she was certain. From the day she had claimed him as hers, he had been testing her. And now, he was presenting to her two arguments, two scenarios that she could take, and he would not give any advice further than that. All he would do was sit back and see which she would pick. To what end, she could not fathom. As she struggled for an answer, Rias did not realize she was slowly falling into the oblivion of sleep on the blonde's lap. Above her, the blonde snorted as the girl finally fell asleep. Play Ayumi Hamasaki progress. When she woke up the next morning, she found herself in her private chambers, carefully wrapped up in a blanket, with absolutely no sign that the blonde had been in there. The crimson-haired ruined princess had almost dismissed the entire night as a strange dream, but the familiar bamboo canister sitting on her dress table said something else entirely. That and the fact that the enigmatic Uzumaki's prediction came true almost immediately. The day had barely gone by when Issei had come back. Battered and bleeding, Hayato Issei had dragged himself back to the clubroom after Asia had chosen to sacrifice herself for his sake, leaving with Rainer, or Yuma as he had once known her. Then he had asked for help. He had gotten on his knees and begged for their help. Are you really that stupid? You will definitely be killed if you go. You won't be able to come back to life anymore. Do you understand? She tried to talk calmly, but her voice clearly wavered. With every word she said, she couldn't help but believe that she was watching the collapse of her pieces. Your actions will affect not only me but also the other members. You are a devil of the Gremry group. You need to be aware of that. Then let me out of this group. The kneeling boy replied resolutely. I'll go there as an individual. You are asking for too much, Issei, the crimson-haired princess said softly. Why don't you understand? I became friends with Asia Argento. From the day I was born until now, the number of people that willingly accepted me, became my friend and honestly smiled at me from the bottom of their heart can be counted on one hand. Asia is my important friend. I won't abandon my friend. The despair on his face when she chose to obey her duty as king, instead of following her heart as a friend, had torn at her very soul. She had slapped him, and denied him the chance to save her. The second time in 2 days, and it had torn at her heart. Issei had simply given her a weak, apologetic smile. He had given her a warm goodbye, grateful even, because she had given him a chance when no one else would. He felt guilty, there was no need to hide it because he knew she could see it leaking from his every pore, and he left without another word. So he went looking for one person he knew was completely neutral even if he was a devil. Help me. Naruto glanced up at the first words to pour out from Issei's mouth. No. His first instinct had been to rage against the indifferent blonde, but strangely enough, he sat down instead as the anger left him feeling incredibly weary. Why? Naruto felt his lips twitch slightly. Because I have no reason to. This is your fight, not mine. Then Issei hesitated as the blonde placidly placed a cup of tea before him. Tell me what I should do. I wouldn't know. He replied calmly with a sip of his tea. I don't have any special attributes. Unlike the way the rook helps Kaneko cover her soft body, unlike how Kiba uses his swords to complement his speed. As a pawn like you, a slightly stronger body is all I got out of the deal, but you have that lizard arm of yours, don't you? Personally, Naruto wasn't entirely sure about the whole being a pawn part, particularly since no one seemed to have a straight answer for him, but as far as he was concerned, it was the position that would have suited his skills the most. He wasn't lying either, as far as he could tell, a slightly stronger body was all he did get from the deal. He just neglected to mention his own skills. But what can I do? When I died, Bucho gave me a chance, she gave me a chance to choose how to live again. I know what I'm doing is like spitting in her face, by using that choice to defy her. But even if I go, I'm not strong enough to do anything. I know if I go now, I won't achieve anything other than make more trouble for everybody else. He slammed the table with his right fist, desperately railing against the injustice of it all. I won't even be able to save one small weak girl. His head was bowed as his shoulders shook, one small girl who hasn't had anything to be happy about. Even if it's a small piece, I want to be able to let her feel that happiness. Across him, the blonde slowly crossed his legs again and smiled faintly, noting that the boy did not think that he himself could give that happiness to Asia. Throughout his interactions with the dark-haired boy, he had gotten the impression that Issei did not really understand what it meant to have a relationship with the opposite sex, despite his all-consuming desire for a woman's flesh, nor did he really want to. Maybe there was hope for Issei after all. Why are you asking me then? It sounds like you already know what you want to do. But what can I do alone? The blonde sighed quite calmly. That is something neither of us will ever know if you don't even go out try in the first place, isn't it? The brown-haired boy blinked. You're here because you want to feel like you can be something you couldn't be back where demons and angels are little pictures in books. Where loners and freaks are isolated by society. Where you yourself admit you were nothing but trash and scum. Here, however, you are accepted by them, both Asia and Bucho. At this moment, you don't know what Rias was like before you met her, but you have met Asia, and you know what kind of pain she has felt. Naruto nodded once, a faint smile of acknowledgement on his lips. You might be a hopeless pervert, you might be worthless trash, and you might be pathetic scum. But right now, the fire inside you is burning, and it's telling you that if you let her die without doing anything, you will be worse than all of the above. Despite himself, Naruto placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. That's why thinking about how to it, or what to do, it's too complicated for an idiot like you. Just go ahead and lash out like the straightforward, kind person you are. If you have to punch them until your knuckles break. If you have to kick them till your legs fall apart. If you have to bite them till your jaws fall off. And if that is not enough? Naruto sent the younger boy a wan smile, and Issei was suddenly struck by exactly how old the blonde seemed to be at that moment. I suggest you take a leaf out of your new girlfriend's book and pray. We're devils. Issei pointed out weakly. Naruto shrugged and jerked his chin at the two shadows behind Issei with a grin. Well, I guess having friends to watch your back for you will just have to do. Issei whirled around and stared at the two of them. Naruto tilted his head at the open-mouthed boy. So why are you still here? The brown-haired boy slowly turned back around. The resolve was clear for all to see, his fire burning brightly once more. Thank you. The blonde sank back into his couch and resumed staring out of the window by his seat. I didn't do anything. I just told you something someone told me a long time ago. He noted with a wry smile, the fire was always there in you. I just gave you the words to express them with. He made a dismissive, shooing motion in the boy's general direction. Now, don't you have a girl to save? Only several minutes had passed after the brown-haired boy had hurried off with Kiba and Kaneko in tow, but for some reason it felt a lot longer than that. That was why when he felt the presence slowly entering the room that he had claimed as his own, he did not react. Rias quirked one amused eyebrow as Naruto simply emptied the rest of his cup of tea and placed it down on the table beside him as he continued to stare out the window, as if he had been expecting her. You let Kaneko and Kiba go with him? Despite the way it had been phrased, it sounded a lot more like a statement than a question. Whether they left or not was not my decision to make, it was theirs. But you could have stopped them, the crimson-haired girl stated, as she almost seemed to gracefully float towards the blonde who had not even looked at her since she entered. He finally turned his amused gaze onto her. So could you? Rias flushed slightly as she acknowledged his point but countered back, you also encouraged him. The blonde simply cocked his head as if she had said something bewildering. I did no such thing. I was simply annoyed because he was so indecisive. This time it was her turn to look amused as she finally understood something about the blonde. Rias placed one hand on his shoulder. Will you come? He wasn't strong, or even powerful, but there was something about the calm confidence he exuded. She was 100% sure that the physically weak boy sitting in that chair could not beat her in a fight, whether magic or physical prowess, but it wasn't a bravado, or even a swagger. Not a smidge of overt pretense at bravery. Not a hint of a brash need to prove himself. It was a simple self-contained expression of self-belief, even though she had no idea what foundation he based that self-belief on. It was simple, composed truth that showed her that you didn't need to be powerful to be strong, and most of all, she finally acknowledged that it allowed her to believe that if she had him in her peerage, she would be able to stand with a straight back as well. It was strange feeling. Might as well. He mock sighed. I want this on record though, I'm only coming since I was getting curious about them anyway. Getting up, he led the girl to where Akino was waiting with a conflicted expression and a glowing sigil laid on the ground beneath her. Hey, it's the donut pervert, Naruto dryly remarked as he stared at the three fallen angels twittering in the trees above them. Donasek. And I am not a pervert. Yeah, whatever pervert. Arg. Dancing away from the spears of light that splattered the ground, he glanced to the side where the other two angels were converging around Akino and Rias. All three of them had been separated by a bubble of energy, stopping them from going to the assistance of the other until they had each defeated their own opponent, as if the fallen angels had coordinated this beforehand. Jet black feathers fell around the clearing as the three of them hovered above their prey, when Donasek fell out of the sky to land before the incredibly stoic blonde, supremely confident in the trap they had set up beforehand to separate the members of the occult club. Does it worry you? You had the advantage last time because I let my guard down and you had your master to protect you, but this time, you're all mine. You were mine from the start, and I'm going to enjoy paying you BA. Naruto pulled out something metallic from his pocket and shot the angel's foot in one smooth motion. OWWW. There was a jarring silence as Akino and Rias stared at his ruthlessness as the blonde calmly twirled a familiar-looking gun. What? The crimson-haired devil smiled wickedly as she mumbled to herself, I need to get him a suit. Isn't that the exorcist's gun? Akino asked curiously from her own side of the barrier. Yep. Naruto calmly punctuated his words with another shot to the man's other foot. He let the ensuing scream fade before continuing, I couldn't think of anything else to use this for, so I might as well just go with it. The blonde swayed like a leaf in a wind, almost leaving afterimages behind with how fluidly he moved to sidestep a spear of light. He regarded the fallen angel's hate-filled glare with boredom. That thing might have hit me once, but the only reason it did was simply because I didn't know anybody could use spells in this world. Trust me, that's not going to work a second time. Donasek, ignoring the pain from his feet, burst forwards with a flap of his wings. Then Naruto pulled out a saucepan from somewhere, and the former angel instantly blanched. His forward momentum was quickly turned into a hopping backpedal as he desperately tried to pull away from the bored-looking blonde. Laughing lowly, Naruto responded by leap after him into the forest, looking like he had just melted into the shadows, leaving nothing but a haunting chuckle behind. Back in the clearing, two other former angels, with feathered wings as black as night, stared as their second command practically ran away screaming from the strange blonde with the saucepan. The much taller, and much more sensual fallen angel wore a strange look on her face. Was that? From the forest, they heard someone's voice come floating back, fear my saucepan of doom. There was another loud thud, and then a girly screech. Was that Donasek, former sage of the heavenly domes, keeper of 1,000 tomes, running from a man and waving a saucepan? Yes. Yes, it was. The smaller one named Miltle deadpanned as she pinched her nose with some resignation. A dark shadow hurtled through the woods as Donasek desperately flapped his wings to compensate for his ruined feet when he suddenly stopped and flared his wings. The centrifugal force sent his fist rocketing through the air, punching through a blonde's face. But there was no substance behind it as his attacker fluidly slipped under the fist again and stomped on his bleeding foot. Donasek's scream was quickly cut off before the blonde flowed from the stomp into an upwards palm drive that slammed his jaw shut. From there, he made a half spin, and used all the momentum from the spin to slam the saucepan full force into the former angel's face. The fallen angel instantly crumpled, but he didn't fall. Chuckling grimly, he flapped his wings and furiously fought for stability while the blonde watched him curiously. Looking down, he threw away the broken pan with a grunt. How annoying. He shot forwards again, one fist reared as if to punch the fallen angel. The bald man laughed loudly, brashly, and flew forward, but instead of meeting fist to fist, the blonde abruptly stopped and the fist changed into a claw, slipping around his guard, before it snagged his collar. Using the fallen angel's own force against him, Naruto suddenly tilted over backwards with the angel's greater momentum and slammed him into the ground skull first. Simple, smooth locomotion. No powerful spells, no flashy abilities required. Wrapping one arm under the man's chin, he pulled and twisted violently. He hadn't regained enough strength yet to perform the rest of the maneuver, but he didn't have to as the fallen angel instantly went limp. Letting him fall to the ground with a grunt, Naruto let out a deep breath and cracked his neck. The two of them had fought until they were at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the fallen angel's hideout. His blue eyes narrowed and a slight blue glow filtered through his iris, allowing his vision to sharpen 10 times over as he watched part of the castle explode. Naruto smiled faintly. How interesting. Where is that bastard? A limping exorcist, who hadn't quite recovered enough from Naruto's loving administration to walk straight yet, roared as he hobbled towards Kaneko, Yuto, and Issei. I'm going to shove this sword up his ass and see if he likes it. How should I know? Go find him and leave us alone. If he's not here, then I'll take my anger out on the three of you. Naruto sneezed. Is something wrong? Nah, he sniffed noisily. It's getting kinda cold, isn't it? Naruto very calmly put another bullet into Donasek's shoulder. Please be civil if you can, or is a simple conversation beyond your abilities? He politely asked the howling man who was currently tied to a tree as the holy bullet dug into his flesh. Shouldn't you be asking me why we are being so aggressive before you put more bullets in me? The fallen angel yelled. Sure. So why? Ask all you want, I'm not saying anything. Donasek sneered through the pain, as if the small victory of being able to throw his defiance in the boy's face at denying him this question was all he needed. Naruto rolled his eyes at the deluded man's bravado. Are you sure about that? The gun's barrel nudged him between his legs, because I'm about to break one of your testicles. Donasek's eyes momentarily went wide before he squeezed them shut when he heard the blonde's finger cocking back the trigger, only to slowly open them when none of the expected pain hit him. The blonde made a great show of giving the ornate-looking gun a disapproving stare. Pulling the trigger again, he made a TSK sound when the gun only fizzled uselessly before throwing it away. Ha! I knew your threats were empty. All of you are too pathetically weak to do anything. Naruto looked at him and sighed theatrically, and slowly he reached behind his back to pull out a hammer. Donasek instantly went ashen. So left or right? Is that all the possessor of the Longinus level sacred gear, boosted gear can do? The dark-haired fallen angel taunted as she ground her heel into the back of the boy's head. Below her, the brown-haired boy gnashed his teeth impotently, cursing his own weakness. His eyes wildly shot around room as he looked for Kaneko-chan and Kiba, trying to assure to himself that they were all right, or at least alive. Kaneko's petite form was slumped against the wall, several slash wounds courtesy of an enraged Freed decorating her small form, but to his relief, her chest was still moving, albeit sluggishly as she tried to draw air into her injured lungs. On the other side of the room, Kiba was buried in a small mountain of rubble. Just barely he could see the boy's platinum blonde hair glinting in the flickering flame of candlelight that illuminated the ruined church. Strewn around him were the bodies of several men, some encased in armor, others clad in robes, all evidence to the tenacious fight the second year had put up against his oppressors. But in the end, despite his skill several magnitudes greater than those around him, their numbers had rendered that particular advantage moot. Freed, on the other hand, had already left the church, going in search for the blonde when they had felt the rumblings of a fight nearby after declaring that he was tired of toying with the girl whose agility was nothing against his speed. That had been his one advantage, as he was sure he could fight against Yuma no Rainer by himself, but certainly not two of them alone. However, that brought him to the here and now. Weak but certainly not defeated. Grunting, he summoned whatever strength he had left and threw rain air off him for all the good it did as the giggling fallen angel simply gracefully floated down to earth. And what do you expected that to do? Groaning, the boy barely managed to lift up his gauntlet to block a spear from piercing his chest, before he pivoted and backhanded the armored man away from him. But that left he completely open for the fallen angel's nearly dainty foot collide against his ribs with not so dainty force, sending him skidding against the cold cement floor until he felt his back hit the wall with crushing force. Crying out in pain, it was all he could do, to pull himself up again and glare defiantly at the fallen angel, and ironically, it was that position that gave him a full view of the reason he had brought his friends here to their potential death, hanging on the wall by her arms, like a saint watching over her lambs. He was fully aware that the only reason he had not joined Kaneko and Kiba in the world of unconsciousness was because the former angel still wanted to toy with him. If the fact that an entire group of mercenaries who had survived Kiba's relentless attacks still stood strong, hanging back at the angel's orders. Templars, he figured, their thick armor, powerful halberds and prayer-like chants certainly matched the description. Behind Yuma, nailed to the cross like a bizarre caricature of the Christian Messiah, was a tiny slip of a girl. Her white priestess robes were torn and left little to the imagination. Asia Argento, so vibrant and cheerful despite the weight that life had seen fit to put on those tiny shoulders. It was her eyes that affected him the most. They closed, and made her seem all for the world as if she was simply taking a nap. Her mouth was open slightly, like she was snoring. A choked sob escaped his lips, even as he tried to flex his armored arm. But no matter how hard he tried, his limbs just refused to listen anymore due to sheer exhaustion. As if she could sense he had come to the end of his strength, Rainer giggled again, a light tinkling sound that sounded disproportionately wrong coming from someone as twisted as her. Era, aren't you going to try and get up again? To try and win? Play Yuki Kajura, hear our prayer. Issei let out a weak laugh. Win? I never thought I'd win at all. Rainer blinked at the boy's admission. I'm well aware of how weak I am. I know that no one really expected me to save Asia. Rainer wrinkled her nose. What the hell are you babbling about? Did your brains get knocked loose? I know that better than anyone, Issei panted as the pain set in. But if I don't try, then who else is going to save Asia? Who else is going to make her happy? The raven-haired beauty sighed. This is getting tiresome. Please. What's that? Rainer blinked. Then she crowed with an unholy pleasure, as her remaining warriors slowly circled around the tired dragon wielder. Were you actually pleading for your life after all that macho posturing? By all means, do it louder. If you do it well enough, I might even consider it. The fallen angel laughed. It was an ugly laugh, and in it, there was nothing remaining of the girl he once knew as Amano Yuma. In that moment, the separation in his mind between Rainer and the girl named Amano Yuma was complete. God, he winced at the sudden stab of pain, but he ignored it. It was a small pain, and absolutely nothing compared to what Asia had already suffered. Rainer's face twisted with even more malice. God? That dead, useless relic? What can he do? Issei flinched away as the fallen angel spat her vitriol at him, but he forged on. Please, I don't care if you strike a demon down for praying to you. I can't make her happy, but you can. She who gave everything to you, help her. Just then the great double doors creaked, and all eyes present swiveled towards the entrance. One of the great wooden barriers hung slightly open, swinging back and forth in a non-existent wind. Satisfied that she couldn't feel anyone's presence, Rainer was about to turn back to Issei when a loud clatter echoed within the church's main chamber. Spinning around, her eyes and ears immediately located the source of the sound, a fallen halberd. Its owner was nowhere in sight. Immediately alert and wary, she swiftly made a head count. Of the 25 Templars and priests that had remained after they had dispatched of the blonde swordsman, but only 24 were standing now. Making a quick hand sign to signal one of the remaining Templars to go and check where their missing brother had gone to, the rest of the group clustered tightly together, making a circle around Rainer and the panting Issei. As the giant of the man came back from his cursory inspection with a hapless shrug, Rainer frowned and turned around. Her eyes proceeded to widen as she realized that she had somehow lost another 3 men, a Templar and 2 priests, leaving a gap in the circle. Behind her, Rainer failed to notice as a dark figure fell out of the shadows encircling the high ceiling, quick as lightning, and snagged the Templar who had gone to check for the source of the disturbance. Twisting his neck with a loud crunch, the shadow retreated again, swallowed up by the shadow sticking to the high roof of the cathedral along with the dead Templar. The entire thing had happened in less than a second, and a confused Issei who had seen the entire thing half wondered if his brain had been knocked around a bit too much. As Rainer snarled and began hurling spears into the inky shadows above them, a dark figure darted out of the shadows from their blind spot, keeping low to the ground, and ran up to one of the priests right at the very back of the group before wrapping one palm around his mouth. The reason he had done so was made obvious when the cloaked figure shoved a sharp piece of wood into the man's right eye, angled in such a way that death was near instantaneous when the wood reached his brains before any one of the Templars or Rainer could notice. By the time his captors had turned around again, the shadow had already almost casually dispatched another 5 of their band, almost elegantly dancing from blind spot to blind spot, sneaking under their gazes as they whirled from shadow to shadow, and snatched someone away like a ghost, much to Issei's bewilderment, since he had watched the entire thing disbelievingly. Therefore, it was probably somewhat unfortunate but expected that the next time the shadow struck, Rainier was already ready for him. While she had lost fully half of her men to him, it had made predicting the shadow's movement somewhat easier. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the figure cloaked by shadows emerge from the far left, and she immediately spun around to get a better look. She was, however, not entirely prepared to see one of her men, blood leaking out of his lips with a terrified look and his eyes shake as the shadow pulled out the arm in the priest's chest with a grisly crunch. The fallen angel could only stare in shock as the priest silently mouthed something that looked suspiciously like a cry for help before he was slowly dragged into the darkness. "Come out! I know you're here!" Almost in response, there was another loud clatter and her eyes snapped towards a figure, which had not been there a second ago as far as she could remember, leaning on the pew just by the doors to the cathedral. Rainier snarled as the figure casually waved. For some reason, her ability to see in the dark could not penetrate the shadows wrapped around the figure. But then again, no one was mad enough to announce his presence to his enemies quite so brazenly, so it obviously had to be the insane priest. "Is that you, Freed? There's someone else here other than these mice." She agitatedly waved at the bleeding boy on the floor. "Take him out along with the other trash and dispose of him while I deal with this new pest." The pace was measured, and his gait resembled someone taking a stroll as the shadow that was supposedly Freed stopped just short of the circle of light illuminating the cathedral. An object flew through the air before falling to the ground before Rainier with a wet splat. It was an arm, or at least part of an arm. The fingers were still twitching with ghost impulses and blood poured from the ragged tear where it was once attached to a shoulder. But what caught his attention was the piece of cloth that decorated the arm. He had seen it barely moments ago on the arm of the person who had delighted in torturing Kaneko to unconsciousness. This was followed by several sets of robes and not a few Templar helmets, all thrown haphazardly onto the ground. Issei blinked, and all at once felt relief flood through his being. He was almost amused to think that he had thought God had seriously answered his prayers. "Freed?" The shadow cocked his head thoughtfully. "Ah, yes. The exorcist. He had to leave in a hurry. But he left that for you." The shadow jerked his chin at the limb, a grin evident from the light reflecting of his teeth. Almost instantly, the fallen angel and her allies were on edge. A spear of light sizzled into existence in her hands as the rest of her Templars silently circled around the shadow professionally, like a band of professional mercenaries, without her needing to say anything. "Who are you?" Rainier demanded angrily, even as she edged closer towards Issei so she could shut him down before he could help the stranger. "Why are you here?" "Why am I here? Well, I guess you could say I'm here to return a favor." The figure stepped out of the shadow and into the flickering light, blonde hair glinting darkly in the wavering shadows. A gun that had once belonged to the mad exorcist Freed hung limply in his fingers. "You," Rainier said with mild amusement as she relaxed slightly. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement, along with a smile that didn't quite match the look in his eyes. "Me. So you became a devil?" "Not entirely my choice, I assure you. I killed you once before, I can do it again." The fallen angel stated with absolute, dismissive confidence. "If you wanted to save your friends, you should have brought more people." "More people?" The blonde's tone was even as it had been since he had appeared here, but something had changed. There was now something simmering below the surface. The gun was lifted until its barrel was pointed directly at Rainier's head. "If you leave now, that will not be necessary." "Oh?" Rainier gave him a mocking smile. "Do you think you can oppose us all just because you have an exorcist's gun? Or did you think you could run and hide in the shadows again?" "No. I do not think I will oppose all of you." The blonde serenely nodded at the significantly less Templars around him who were glaring at him with animosity, probably because of all their friends he had taken away. "But then you don't have as many people anymore. Even if I can't beat you, I can delay you long enough for reinforcements to arrive." There was an explosion from outside the cathedral, as if to punctuate his words. Hearing the blonde's words, Rainier gnashed her teeth for a moment, then as if by magic, her snarl was washed away. Her features almost seemed to morph back into the innocent visage of Amano Yuma, a sad smile plastered on as she radiated sincerity and honesty. The Templars grudgingly backing off at a sign from her fingers. "You are right," her shoulders sagged wearily. "We just wanted to find a place to stay. We didn't want to fight at all, but to stay alive we need power. But I admit, at this moment, we certainly don't have enough of it to resist, so if you can keep those devils from threatening our home, then you can leave with them." The blonde stood stock still for a moment as if considering her words before he acquiesced. The gun was released from his grip and clattered on the floor. Silently, he strode past the simmering Templars, past the smiling fallen angel and knelt at Issei's side, the worst injured of the three. Clear blue eyes gave Issei a once-over before Naruto spoke again. "You alright?" he asked calmly, and certainly far more serious than Issei had ever seen him being. "I'm alive," Issei wheezed. It pained him to even talk, but he couldn't help the wide grin. "But I'm kinda tired. You mind cleaning up for me?" He was about to help Issei stand up when he heard the click of a hammer being pulled back. I lied. Naruto stood up with a sigh and faced the fallen angel, whose features had twisted again as she inspected the silver gun in her hands, her templars moving forward again. All of them were grinning malevolently at the promise of extracting revenge for their brethren who had fallen to him and his shadows. So was this thing how you managed to defeat Freed and those worthless trashes? A condescending sneer reappeared on her face as she leveled the gun at his head, just as he had done earlier. We just wanted to find a place to stay. We didn't want to fight at all. Naruto did not reply as the girl repeated her earlier words with a mocking tone. Typical. One smile from a beautiful face and all of you monkeys instantly fall for it like a brick in water. You gave us your word. The blonde replied calmly as he ducked away from the Templar's attempt at cornering him and Issei. At least, with their focus on him, Issei would be temporarily safe as long as he stayed quiet. Here's a tip, not that it'll be much use to you considering you'll be dead in a second, but you should never believe a fallen angel's word. It's not worth very much after all. The former angel told him with a strangely bitter smile. Then she pulled the trigger. Said smile instantly dropped a moment later as the gun clicked loudly in the empty cathedral, and failed to do anything else. You should have taken that offer, because if it comes to a fight, I do not need a gun. A regretful gaze was directed at Rainier, who threw implement away with a sneer. All I will need is one hand. Run, Naruto. You can't beat them. Then again, this was Issei. From what little he had interacted with the boy, staying quiet wasn't exactly one of his strengths. Issei suddenly felt Rainier's presence towering over them with a deadly look in her eyes. Quit talking and drop dead already, trash. Her leg lashed out, far quicker than Issei could react, and smashed into his side, breaking more than a few ribs while lifting him up and sending him flying again. However, this time there was no pain from hitting a wall, no final crash. Instead there was an enveloping warmth, as he felt something solid and firm catch him easily, like one would a weak kitten. Play Fate/0 OST, rule the battlefield. You did well. His eyes remained shut as the firm warmth gently set him down, only to open the moments later when he heard two faint thuds as Naruto dropped Kaneko, and then Kiba in a rather unceremonious manner next to him. He's not going to be happy about that bruise, Issei commented dryly with a smirk at the unconscious Kiba who had landed flat on his face. He's got a lot more to be worried about than a bruise I gave him. A choked laugh bubbled up his throat before the pain sent him reeling, until he felt the blonde steady him with a firm palm on the chest. Strangely enough, it didn't hurt quite so bad anymore after that. That's enough, Issei, you've done enough. His voice was far warmer and approving than he had ever heard. Rest now. As much as he struggled against it, something was pulling him away from unconsciousness, but he resisted, long enough to grasp the blonde's lapel with a wild look in her eyes. Save her, he said in a hoarse whisper, his eyes flickering to the body on the cross. She deserves at least a burial. The blonde's clear blue eyes met his for a moment, before he solemnly nodded. So what will you do now? Rainier inquired with a bored tone. Hiding in the shadows won't work anymore because we know you're here now, and you don't even have a gun to threaten me with now. Sighing at the interruption, Naruto carefully laid the injured dragon wielder down and straightened up, his face a carefully blanked mask. Rainier curiously as she watched the blonde go so very still. With his eyes closed, if it had not been for his measured breathing, she would have thought him dead already. That was an amusing thought, for the blonde to die from pure fright from facing a legion of humanity's myths before they could even do it themselves. He inhaled once. Then exhaled. All at once, a heavy presence flooded the church, and as everyone still conscious took a step away from the blonde who looked anything but amused as long-buried instincts all came to life. And every single one of those blaring instincts screamed the same thing. I had tried to scare you away, tried to give you the impression that you were facing a force far superior to your own, tried to let you live another day because it wasn't my fight. I can see now that it was a waste of my time, that threats do not work when the people being threatened are far too stupid to understand it. The blonde intoned softly, that you need something a bit more obvious. His eyes were still closed, but he had no need of them for the moment. Or rather, he knew far too well that once he opened his eyes, and laid them on these people who had no qualms about trampling on the corpses of others to climb higher, he would most likely break a very important promise. You have me surrounded and outnumbered. That is why I offer you this one last time. Leave. And prove to yourselves that you are not the evil people you believe to be. If you do, I will not pursue you. I will not chase you, and I will not hurt you. Stay. And being hurt will be the last of your problems. Rainier felt almost proud that not a single one of her men had dropped their wands, sheathed their swords, or discarded their halberds. If anything, his declaration had only made them angrier. Their numbers had been picked apart, and their honor stained, all by a mouse that was only capable of sneaking in the dark and using underhanded tactics. They would be more than happy to prove to him that such a feat would not have been possible if he had faced them like a man. You'll let us leave? What arrogance coming from a failure I once disposed of before. A failure that needs a gun to do anything. The sigh that came from the man whose eyes were still closed were almost sorrowful. So be it, come. Do your worst. As you wish. Raina grinned happily. Her trained warriors, every single one of them was more than enough to take on a mid-level devil or angel individually, and win. Easily. Together, a higher-level angel or devil stood no chance against their flawless teamwork whatsoever. Kokabeel had trained them personally after all. Or at least he had threatened them enough for discipline to set in. They moved like a well-oiled machine, far faster than any human had any right to be. Enhanced by the experiments, empowered by the drugs and emboldened by their numbers, their spears and halberds crashed into the blonde's comparatively tiny frame. Raina simply quirked an amused eyebrow. After all that talk, you really were nothing after all. With one contemptuous flick of the wrist, she sent a spear hurtling at his heart, and turned around, cleaned the bodies up. Already dismissing them as dead, we have to leave before further reinforcements arrive. You have done your worst. Raina blinked and spun around to see something she believed she would remember for the rest of her life. Halberds clanged on his skin before they bounced off, swords sparked against his muscles before they were deflected, the spear hit his head and did nothing worse than leave a slightly red spot. Now, let me show you how a failure overcomes your best. Then those horrible goat-like eyes swiveled in their sockets, and they each felt that dreadful gaze. He grabbed a sword that had been aimed at his eyes and snapped it just by squeezing. It was as if his skin itself had become harder than the thickest granite. This is nothing compared to what they felt. He took one step forward and all but ignored the spear of light that bounced off his skin. The desperation, as they tried to do what was right against overwhelming odds. Every step he made caused a metallic tinkling sound from his body as all the weapons that struck him rasped, sparked, and rattled uselessly. It was brave. But stupid. Quite stupid. He took another step forward and the fallen Templars took 2 steps back, each filled with horror at the unstoppable abomination before them as he shot them another fanged grin. Even angels had fallen before them, but here was one puny devil and he was ignoring them like they were flies. I do not hate people like that. Then his eyes finally opened. And she felt it long a split second before she saw it. Are you sure this is the place? Rias asked her friend curiously. It is. Aquino looked around somewhat uncertainly, though I can say I remember it being quite so deep when I came here the first time. I don't think I've ever seen you quite this annoyed with someone before. I think I finally understand why he finds it so amusing to push your buttons when it's usually you doing the pushing. Seeing you so hacked off is rather refreshing. The crimson-haired princess remarked with a grin as she ignored the glare her best friend was shooting her. Why don't you just admit you miss him and be done with your excuses? She groaned. All amusement disappeared from Ria's face. You know why I can't do that, Aquino. All I know is that you're taking a stupidly roundabout approach about the whole thing. I saw the way he looked at you when we were explaining what the pieces are for. I don't know how he knows, but he knows you lied about the pieces. The flame-haired princess quirked one eyebrow at Aquino. Is it me, or did you just compliment him? And I did not lie, I simply misdirected him. She noted primly. Stop changing the subject. Aquino ordered mock haughtily. Rias's lips spread with an impish grin. I am not changing the subject. I have already changed it. Echoing the words Naruto had used in the infirmary the day they had met. The raven-haired girl rolled her eyes as she struggled through the underbrush with a feminine growl. I do not like the fact that he left us to deal with those 2 fallen angels, and then go off on his own. Even if he did help Kaneko and Kiba, I simply do not trust him to have done it without an ulterior motive. Why would he suddenly do it anyway? Her friend kept on grumbling, and I don't appreciate him making us walk all the way here either because I know he's doing it on purpose. Calm down. I just want to know why he has not attended school recently. Rias frowned. Ever since she had found him, legs folded and eyes closed on the steps outside the cathedral, the blonde had refused to speak to her. To any of them, actually. He had only indicated that her pieces were safe inside the cathedral with a strange, almost self-mocking smile, then he had left them without further explanation. To Rias, who had sincerely believed that they had been making headway in drawing the blonde closer into her peerage, especially when he had agreed, albeit reluctantly to help, this was a sudden and rather unwelcome backslide. Besides, don't you want to see where he lives? Rias continued trying to soothe her friend as the 2 of them carefully wound their way through a thin and used path that cut through the forest behind Ko Academy. Aquino was about to shoot back that she was well aware of where he lived, when they stepped over a strange line made with chalk and slight frisson ran down her back. She instantly stiffened, a ball of electricity already crackling in her palm. Did you feel that? Is something watching us? I don't think so. Rias said slowly, though she continued to keep a wary eye on the dark forest as they kept going deeper and deeper into the forest. Did you feel that the last time you came to? No, Akino finally replied as she let her lightning dissipate slowly. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen this part of the woods for some reason. Are you saying that we're lost? Akino jerked her chin at the path and at the small, almost unnoticeable pebbles lining the path. The path is here, the marks he showed to me are there too. But the forest itself, it feels different. More alive. It took them a few more minutes to reach the end of the path where it came to an abrupt end, spilling out into a small clearing. The eerily silent forest was suddenly filled with the sounds of wood being chopped, as if someone had lifted a blanket of silence from their ears, something that the two of them immediately noticed. At the edge of the clearing, a familiar blonde continued to chop away at a tree as beads of sweat clearly ran down his broad back, clearing a large space around an old-fashioned stone shed with an axe. As the tree fell with a loud crash, the blonde set down his axe with a sigh and hefted up a bundle of wood. Without giving any sign of realizing that they were there, the blonde carefully tucked the pile of wood away before he calmly and efficiently picked up a kettle that was already boiling and began making some tea. Setting 3 cups down on a convenient stump, the strange blonde stared at the spot where the 2 girls were hidden. He stayed silent and kept staring at the bush until the 2 of them finally stumbled out of the shrub with shamefaced expressions. "Have you had dinner?" he asked courteously as the 2 girls daintily found a stump each to sit around the makeshift table. "That's all right." Although a little curious, Rias still managed to shrug on an unconcerned air like the noble she was as she tried, and failed, to look uninterested in her year-mate's accommodations. "We've already eaten at Issei's place after we dropped Asia there." "Very well." The blonde nodded stiffly and ignored the frown on her face. "Is there anything I can help you with before you go?" The dismissal in his question was not missed by anyone. Akino glanced at the shabby but serviceable stone hut. "Do you have a toilet in there?" she asked with a strange look. "It's inside, to your left," Naruto replied quite blandly. As she stood up, Akino made sure that her back was to Naruto so that he could not see the significant look she was sending to Rias. The message within was clear and acknowledged with slight nod. Suppressing the urge to let out an exasperated sigh, she set her shoulders and began to climb towards the hut.